Knocking back beers and stuff, but coming eventually. Throwing zins in too, you know.
Both bathrooms are still bathrooms. I don't know.
What bathroom? Both bathrooms. You mean a bucket?
Like a nice
and
one.
We are live. Welcome to the NBA Deeper Dive. It is Monday, January 6th. Fun day. I'm Josh Engleman. I'm joined by Chris Spags. We got an 8-game slate ahead of us, and everything locks at 8 p.m. We do have a 9th game today that we will not be talking about. So shout out to both sites for dropping that from their schedule. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Follow us both on Twitter. How you doing, Spags? No more regular season NFL. You going to be okay?
Yeah, it's a little bit sad. I mean, obviously, we still have a lot of DFS coming up here, as the content schedule on Stokastic will tell you. When you have playoff games out the wazoo, different days of it. But it's a little bit weird, like process-wise for me, because normally I wake up, do a showdown video on my Splash Play channel. I kind of get into my content creation mindset. And today, snow day, the kids off school. Like I'm doing this basketball content starting at 4 o'clock instead of the usual timing. So throws me off a little bit. But I'm ready to storm the Capitol, a great place today, Josh, in honor of the day.
Incredible. They should take you away right now. I'm surprised you didn't swap that money hat out for a Viking helmet.
That's what I'm known for. I really support those things.
Yeah, that was good. I'm a little jealous of that. Can't lie. Yeah, it's a weird slate today. We've got a mess in Orlando and New York with Cole Anthony in a game that like you don't really want to roster people in. San Antonio, Chicago is kind of fun, depending on how you're feeling about Wemby today. We've also got Giannis out there, no Middleton today now. It's just a lot. And a new look Phoenix Suns starting lineup, evidently. Okay.
He's going to stop Joel Embiid if he plays.
Yeah, he might be dying of laughter while he's on the floor. But that's not the game we got to talk about. The first game that we have up today, the Portland Trailblazers. They are 6.5-point dogs in Detroit, 224 total. Not much to talk about here on the Portland side. It's just sort of no Jeremy Grant like it's been for a couple days, and everybody else that's normally available is. And that's creating a little bit of value for us right now. We've got 25% ownership coming into Anthony Simons, a little over 10 to Shaedon Sharpe, and near 30 for Denny Avdia. Only 5 for Kamara, Ayton, Scoot, Donovan Clingan. Let's start with the most owned guy here, Denny Avdia. Small forward, power forward eligible, 6,600. Not surprised to see him pull this kind of ownership. Matchups, fine. The role is definitely increased. There are a ton of minutes there if he needs them. Feels a little high, and it's the 7 o'clock start, but I mean, to me, he's the best guy you can get to for Portland.
Yeah, Avdia, I would say, is a core play for me today. I feel pretty comfortable with him overall. That said, I get what Josh is saying. Like, and I was, looking through the slate, and I felt the same thing. It's a lot of ownership for Portland, Detroit in the slate where you have so many Q tag guys. And we do talk about that a lot in the show, where when you kind of tie your flexibility up in that first game, doesn't feel the best. Out of all the guys in this game, though, I think I feel the most comfortable with Avdia, who I do kind of plug and play whenever Jeremy Grant's out, and I assume the field feels the same way. The rates for him jump up a little bit, about 23% usage, 12% rebound rate, 20% assist rate, does a little bit of everything. Kind of a ball hog, honestly, when he gets to court time and Grant's not out. So I don't mind that. I feel a lot better about Avdia than Anthony Simons. I don't get the Simons chalk ownership. I know he's been good lately. He's been so bad on the year. I'd rather have Avdia. I have Avdia in 44% of my lineups. I have Simons at 1%, and they're both going to be about a quarter owned by the field. So that's my big stand for the day, I guess, right to start up top.
Yeah, I don't really understand the Simons ownership either. To me, he's like a 10 to 15% guy, not a 25% guy, especially point guard only in 6,400. Like if you had the MPE, that sure, you can talk me into it a little bit more, but that one feels oddly high too. Like I think Shaden Sharp looks better than Anthony Simons. I don't know if that's crazy. I mean, he's got the MPE $700 cheaper and he's half the ownership. To me, I'd rather just get to Shaden Sharp in this scenario over Simons. And I also think that Kamara is like a hair under owned, 4,700. You get that shooting guard, small forward eligibility. I don't love locking in a value play at the 7 o'clock start, but I don't mind it. To me, it's really pretty clearly Avdia as like the main event from Portland. I'm surprised to see the Simons ownership.
Yeah, me too. I think it's maybe a little box score chasey. Like Simons has had some better days lately, but it's like the projections wouldn't have that, so I don't get it. Like I get the field playing Simons more for that reason, and I get the theory of it, like Jeremy Grant being out. But I think when you really kind of dial in on what Simons has been this year, he's been a 0.95 fantasy point per minute guy. The shooting for him is also down a little bit compared to when he got that big contract. He's now at 54.5% true shooting on the year. He's just not as great of a player, but people are going to be there if you want to be with the field on it. Account for the 25% ownership. I don't mind Ayton either, too. 15% of him for me in my top 150, and I feel like he's an okay play, even though it might be better center plays that open up later on.
Yeah, I should have probably said something about Ayton. He's always sort of just available. The minutes are when he's playing, the minutes are going to be there. Anytime you can get a 30+ minute center, at 6% ownership, I don't have any issue. I actually had him 10% optimal, so a bit under owned. I do have to hit two messages. First from Joseph Ramirez, who said, lucky slabhead can't finish. Shout out to Manchester United this weekend for grabbing their second goal and tying the game up. They didn't deserve it, but they got it anyway. 2-2 draw. Harry Maguire. Harry Maguire had a ball coming across right at the penalty spot with no time left. Tap in. Bouncing ball, so tough ball. Skied it into the stands and choked it away. Deserves every bit of it. Falcon.
Classic slabhead. That's such a slabhead play if I ever heard one.
And then Yobi Trice said, Sims seem to eliminate most of the Grizzlies except one or two players in order to fit Wemby and Giannis. Do you feel differently? Also, I hate NFL Week 18. Definitely with you there. I feel, however, the Sims spit out the lineups and grade them. I don't have a preference between having both of them or not having both of them. I will say that I am not particularly fond of Memphis today, other than Triple J. So I don't really think they have much value to worry about missing.
I like Scottie Pippen more than you do, but I heard your talk about him on the strategy show this morning. I think when you have Bane and Moran out, I think Pippen makes more sense of a play. When the field gets there too much and you have one of those guys in, I'm less inclined. I think Kennard being in there too and being protected for mid-20s minutes probably not great for Pippen's outlay. But
no, I mean, look, Pippen's 4% owned now, so like, sure, like I don't mind getting Scottie Pippen in some lineups at 4% owned, but we'll get there. We'll get there. But they're not really all that owned outside of Triple J getting to 20. The highest owned guy is either Conchar or Brandon Clark at 13. So I'm not super worried about losing out on one of the 8 random Memphis dudes. Having Wemby and Giannis feels like a pretty good thing to do.
That won the slate last week. I think that won on Friday. Something like that.
That was Wemby Jokic.
Oh, Wemby, that's right.
Yeah.
Similar.
Got me all the way to 9th, brother.
Really?
Which is not enough, unfortunately.
Story of our lives.
Yes. Okay. Pistons side. Now we're getting some ownership. No Asar Thompson. We got that news a little bit earlier. They have Ron Harper Jr. and Ron Holland II. That's confusing. Obviously, no Jaden Ivey, who's out with the broken leg, but we lost Asar Thompson to illness, and we are getting a ton of ownership to the Pistons. So much so, this is the most owned team on today's slate. 30% to Cade, 25 to Tobias Harris, 15 to Malik Beasley, close to 25 on Simone Fontecchio, who is the flat min as if he hasn't played this year, and 10% to Beef Stew, a $3,500 center. Let's start at the top. How you feeling about a $9,700 Cade?
pretty enthusiastic. I'm getting him in 41% of my top 150 lineups, which, the rates for him in court time without Jaden Ivey look pretty good. Accounting for the matchup today with Portland, I'd have him, it feels like a really aggressive 1.55 fantasy points a minute today, but he's been at about 1.45 without Ivy on the court. So when you account for the matchup, pretty decent total for the trade. I get how I'm getting there. But again, it feels like a lot tying up here with Cade Cunningham. A lot of salary being tied up early on in the slate, but you can have some flexibility. Again, God forbid you get Embiid out. God forbid you get some of the other guys out. It's going to change the slate enough. But I think Cade's a solid play versus Portland, so I really have no issue there. The rest of the guys also chalky too, but I want to hear your takes on them first.
No problems at all with the Cade ownership. He's just really good. The spot works. I'll never have a problem getting to him. I mean, it feels a hair high, but you're either sort of paying all the way up for Wemby and Giannis, or that's kind of the range you're sitting in. So I don't hate that too much. I had a lot of Tobias Harris on Friday. That worked out. I think his role is a lot better now without Jaden Ivey around. 5,400 seems fine. I think that ownership is spot on. So I don't mind either one of those guys. Fontecchio feels a little overowned, but at the same time, I think that's just a testament of how little value we have and how advantageous it is to get up to your Giannis plus Victor Wembanyama combination, because they're essentially the two pay-ups. I mean, Towns is at 10K. I have him more than 10 points behind Giannis, more than 10 points behind Wemby. That's a lot of points for those two guys. And I think that's sort of why we're seeing Fontecchio climb that high. Now, 3K works. He's like a 0.75 guy. He's a little overowned, I think. Nothing crazy, but a little overowned. I like the value. I'm a little scared by the value. Beef Stew's fine. Malik Beasley's fine. I don't really love much else other than Cade and Tobias.
Yeah, the Fontecchio, so I'm getting so much of the Pistons now. I just kind of reran the sim and pulled things back in. I was getting a normal amount before. I'm getting a ton of Beasley, and he's my biggest stand here with 35%. Fontecchio, I'm low on. I get why you would get there with a 3K salary, like Josh mentioned, being, that salary normally won't kill you. But again, on a slate where you have so many options that might open up later on, I would have a hard time being like 25% of a play on Fontecchio. I feel like Beasley's the one I would cape for the most here. I'm with you on Tobias Harris, getting about a third of my lineups with him, which is above the field as well. But I think with Beasley, projected for about 30.8 minutes now, passing that 30-minute mark. I feel like he's a stronger play than the ownership is going to. And he kind of would cut away at Fontecchio if he went off. Fontecchio, I guess, doesn't do anything. So you're just kind of playing him in the hopes that he falls into some stats. But I feel like Beasley, being low owned here, I don't know why Beasley is so low owned as he is when I'm getting him this much.
I had him 8% optimal, 15% boom. Anywhere in that 10 to 15% range makes some sense. Could be a hair. I don't. I think he looks okay on mine. What do we have him at? 29.9. I could be a minute light there, but I think 15% ownership feels about right there for Beasley.
So yeah, I mean, you're with the field then. I'm 2x above it. So I'm getting about a third of all the guys, which is generally the way I don't mind attacking things, where it's like you get kind of this team. They're all representing some portion of your lineups. When hopefully one of them hits, maybe multiple of them hit together. I'll get some lineups with it. So I'm okay with playing it as I am, but I do feel like I'm surprised people are this low on Beasley. I do have him about, I guess, 0.8 higher than Stokastic does, but that doesn't feel like enough to get 2x the ownership on. More than that.
I mean, the matchup's obviously fine. You don't hate attacking Portland. It's not a good defense at all. I do worry about having a little bit too much of this game. That's why, if you're getting Cade, you don't care if you're locking somebody in early. And I don't think it matters too much to get to Tobias Harris. It does make me a little nervous, the extra shares I grab of your Hardaways, your Fontecchios, your Stewarts, but I think the value is just too hard to ignore unless we get some news that really creates a bunch of additional value and snuffs out that Fontecchio ownership. I think we're just going to be getting a lot of Detroit. I think there's a reason that the entire slate, or they're the highest owned team on the entire slate. That doesn't shock me. But in terms of just overall optimal rate or overall boom, I got a lot of teams that look like Detroit. So I'm intrigued to see where we differ as we keep this one moving.
Yeah. I mean, not having Ivy in there is a pretty big part of it. The prices haven't fully caught up on that, but it does feel like you're getting maybe a little bit too much ownership for that reason. And of course, the matchup versus Portland, two factors coming together to make maybe too much ownership for everybody.
Got a real fun one here. Phoenix Suns, 3.5 point dogs in Philly. 221 total. So Phoenix Suns are without Royce O'Neal and allegedly are starting Tyus Jones, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Ryan Dunn, and Mason Plumlee. That is resulting in them being no more than 3% owned to Durant on DraftKings, no more than 6% owned to Durant on FanDuel. I don't really like anything here for Phoenix. If you get Durant or Booker, I wouldn't unclick those names. I would like to not have any bit of the Phoenix Suns.
I'm getting Durant about 5%. I'm okay with that. I'm going to be
Yeah.
low on Embiid today, so getting kind of Durant as a pivot
Mm.
to that, I think, is okay for me. But yeah, like I'm with you. I think this price tag situation is not great for them at all. And the fact you still have Beal and Nurkic, like they're in the lineup, so they're still going to create some production. It's hard to get their projection wise. It's not like the games where you have Nurkic out and then Plumlee looks better. You have Plumlee projected for 21 minutes today, maybe 22, and Stokastic's projections. It's not enough minutes for him to get there either. So everybody looks worse as a result. The matchup itself is not great. I think Durant, having that 5% is okay to me, but even that I could live without. Like they just don't look like they look correct for today. They don't look like anybody put any effort to actually get them where they should be.
No, lot of things going wrong and not looking right in Phoenix. I don't know what they're gonna do, but I don't think it would be totally crazy to see them tear it all apart before February,
I don't
which would
think they're a
be
smart enough organization to do that. I heard you talk about it on the strategy show and your points. The strategy show, when it becomes Josh's trade hour, is one of my favorite versions of the strategy show. But your Booker talk, like I thought made a lot of sense, but it's like, what are they a smart enough front office to know that? I don't think they are.
I mean, I think Ishbia can look at it and think like, if we can't fix this, there is only one fix. I don't think he would try to like go at it in two different directions and like try to retool because I don't know how you could do it. They don't have anything. I mean, even their like second round picks are pick swaps now. They've traded all sorts of weird nonsense moving forward. If you think, I mean, that if we're going based on dunks and threes playoff odds, they're 20% to make the playoffs. I'm going to pull it up on FanDuel just to see if there's a to miss the playoffs odds on those guys right now. Which, all right, to make the playoffs, Phoenix even money plus 102. If this goes slightly wrong over the next 2 weeks, I think you ship everything out. Everything being Booker and Durant. And you just say, screw it, we got to start over. Because I don't know how you correct it. It's not like OKC is about to get any worse. It's not like Memphis is about to get any worse. Let's just say Nikola Jokic isn't going anywhere, whatever they want to do. And Victor Wembanyama is just here already. That says nothing for Dallas, for Minnesota, for the Clippers. They're dead. Find some picks, ship them out, try to save yourself in the future because it's not now any longer.
I think you're right. I think it's different to have the courage to do that. And I think, too, with the way they've treated this team, like they feel like they're now a team that's going to never fully tank to be competitive because they're doing stuff in Phoenix. He's got a lot of business things. They're trying to do the family packages and get people back in. So I would tend to think they don't blow it up. But I'm with you. Like it would be logical to blow it up because the Booker's the only asset they have that really matters. Durant, they'll get some stuff for, but not a lot at this point.
I mean, it depends who they want to trade him to. I feel like they can probably get a couple first.
Look, I think you're right, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I mean, obviously for Booker, they get whatever they want. As many, like they're getting 7 draft picks, they're getting 4 unprotecteds and 3 swaps. Like there's just that's the bell of the ball. Anyway, Philly, you told me you were a little light on Joel Embiid. He's questionable. Kelly Oubre is questionable. Kyle Lowry's questionable. And the only guy that's getting any love here on the DraftKings side is Embiid, 18% owned at 9,600. Tyrese Maxey is getting 20% ownership on the FanDuel side at 8,400. Talk me through Embiid because I like him a lot today at that price tag, and especially because Mason Plumlee's on the opposite end.
So I was low on him when doing my stream before this one. And of course, the data updated, moved around. I think because of the way things moved with, I would guess the Detroit pieces, I now can afford Embiid a bit more. So I'm now at 21%. I'm with him on the field. I guess my case against him would be, and it's a pain point for me as somebody that does, you make my own projections. I use stochastic minutes, but I create the projections kind of separately. Is like with Embiid, I've had to change his rates this entire year. Like I've had to make his rates what they were in the past. Because every single slate, if you kind of use what he's been this year, he doesn't project quite as well. Because you have guys in there with high usage. Embiid himself was being a diva in the beginning of the year. Then he kind of course corrected when they had the talking to the come to Jesus meeting where Tyrese Maxey yelled at him. The rates have looked better since then, but if you're going to critique Embiid, I think it's that. If he is going to be 19% owned, I feel like that's a little more reasonable. I was getting him so much in the stochastics in my round before the show. That spooked me. But 20%, I'm there a little bit more. The matchup, like we talked about with Plumlee, that's just nothing that's going to stop him. At least with Nurkic, it's a big body that's in the way. With Plumlee, he's just going to be able to abuse him, and Plumlee will probably commit some fouls, get him to the line. He probably with the Nurkic matchup anyway. But I think with Embiid, like, if he's going to be reasonably owned, I'll get there. But I thought he was going to be spookily owned, and I think that's not the case right now.
What if he doesn't play? Are you getting to Yabu? Or are you getting to Andre Drummond in this spot?
I mean, Drummond at 4,100, I think if you were getting the start would look pretty appealing. He's not the same guy as he was in the past, but I think would look good. But I think it'd be more Maxey, more Paul George. Paul George already borderline playable to me. Certainly the center minutes would be appealing, especially because it's not now like a real center matchup going against Plumlee. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody looks a little bit better here, competitive spot. So Embiid, if he goes, seems like the key play. And then if Embiid's out, you probably get more of everybody here, and it looks a little bit more like Detroit, would be my guess.
This game just like Philly has such an opportunity to look so weird if those 3Q tags are just out.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much in flux. I really do like Embiid here, though. I have him 18% optimal, 35% chance to get to 57 fantasy points. The problem is you've got Victor Wembanyama out there at a very nice price tag. You've got Giannis with power forward center eligibility. You've got Jaren Jackson out there with power forward center eligibility. So we got a lot of guys in this realm. I just feel like Embiid is live. Like, what if Phoenix just quits on this entire game and Embiid has the ability to just like do whatever he wants to Mason Plumlee? Then they don't put Nurk out there and it's Iguodaro and they can't do anything still. I see the ceiling for Embiid and that scares me. But I also see the floor for Philly. You never know what they're going to do. Philly. Do you want Maxey or George? They look appropriately owned.
I'm getting George a little bit more here, though I do have him higher project than Stokastic. I have him for 36.3 compared to a 34.5, and that matters because he's shooting guard, small forward, and priced at 7,100. Paul George is cheap. Like, I think if you get him beat out, Paul George is like a smash play, get a lot of exposure to. But I think that Paul George, as he is an okay play. And if, let's say Embiid does some Embiid shit, goes in this game, gets a lot of ownership, then kind of leaves in the first quarter or something, Paul George will look great at that price tag. So I think as it is, getting 10% of them would feel okay to me. 15 you can get me to. But 6% owned, I think it's a little light for him. The price tag is like, it's got to be like a historical low for Paul George at this point, or pretty close to it.
It's got to be the first time he's been as low as he is and playing regular minutes in a very long time. Like early Pacers, probably.
Right.
Which is crazy to think about. All right, guys, schedule for the rest of the day is very simple. NBA Live Before Lock is coming up next. Greg and Eric will take you from 6 o'clock all the way up until 7 o'clock. And then Greg and I will be on playback. And that's the interesting part of today because this slate is over at 8. So we're going to be there for the full hour from 7 to 8, breaking down ownership, news, late swaps, whatever we can find. Because we're going to have a big set of swaps heading into the 7:30 games. Then we're going to have a big set of swaps potentially heading into the 8 o'clock games. You do not want, and there goes Joel Embiid out for today. Well, boom. We just got it.
That's good timing, I guess.
Jason Farnsworth got it wrong right as it was happening. That's always fun to see. Embiid is going to play versus Plumlee. If it was a good center, he going duck. Nope. Wrong. Out. The moment it came out of your fingertips.
Americans just don't want to work, and that includes Joel Embiid.
Yeah, we got to figure out if he's already on the train from Philly to DC. Embiid out. Kyle Lowry out. I'm just waiting for my watch to do something and tell us the Kelly Oubre news, but maybe we're waiting on that one. Either way, Philly looks a little bit more interesting now. Yabu certainly more in play. Andre Drummond potentially more in play at 4,100. We'll see what those new projections look like. Paul George going to look better. Tyrese Maxey going to look better. I know who's going to break that down. That would be the NBA Live Before Lock crew when we're done this show. Pacers, 10.5 point favorites in Brooklyn, 222 total. Pacers are at full strength, other than still just not having Aaron Nesmith. But hopefully that dude gets back from some time. There's a dude named Ray J. Dennis on the Pacers, and his name is Ray J, like Ray, the letter J.
I saw that too this morning. It was like, do I have his name wrong? Has he not played a minute here? But yeah, he's Ray J with no dash, just Ray capital J.
Look, as a major Ray J fan, that is exciting to me. I'm going to be listening to some Ray J music tonight. That's for sure.
Not watching any of his video work.
Well, I want to watch Snakes in the Grass. It's not a video, but it's a great track.
Ray J is the connecting thread to a lot of hip hop things. It's one of the things with him that people talk about.
I mean, For the Love of Ray J is one of the low-key, unintentional funny shows I've ever seen in my life. I watched that as it was happening, and it still makes me laugh to this day, and that's like 16 years ago or more at this point. Oh, that's a nipple. I mean, it's so good. So you woke up one day and you were like, I'm gonna get this tattoo on my motherfucking face. Oh God, it's so good. I highly implore everybody to go out and watch the first 2 episodes of For the Love of Ray J. Just trust me. Trust me.
Okay. I watched Flavor of Love and the Brett Michaels show back in the day. I didn't get to Ray J.
I mean, like, think about Flavor of Love when that girl took a dump on the stairs during the recording. That was real. That girl really took a dump during filming.
Yeah, that was not reality hamming it up, unfortunately. Nothing on that show was.
Oh man, I bet they were like, what a gem. We couldn't even make this. We couldn't make this. Anyway, Indiana. They're the same team they always are. Their prices are the same they always are. Siakam is 12% owned. Everybody else is very low single digits. I'd take any one of the starters. I don't think anybody looks like somebody I would want to have a lot of. But give me Halliburton, Mathurin, Siakam, Turner, and Nembhard. They can be in a lineup. I just don't want a ton.
Yeah, I'm with you on it. And chat calm down a little bit. Like we can have a deviation. We'll get back on track. Don't worry, guys.
It's just this Styles character screaming at everybody. And Kobe Jones is going away too. You go away permanently.
Yeah, we're professionals here. Don't worry, guys. But Halliburton here. Halliburton is a play that I always am a little bit under the field on. Always have a little bit lower projected in the field because he just hasn't looked like the same player since they traded for Siakam. That said, when he's 1% owned, 2% owned his projection right now. Those tend to be the days I think he looks a little bit more appealing. So I'm not a Halliburton fan, but I will plant the flag that I think he's a decent tournament play today, just because of the fact nobody's on him. And those are the days that he actually does work out well. Because usually he's not that great of a play at his price tag. Besides that, everybody else here, tournament options. I'm low on Siakam. Siakam was previously projecting a little bit higher, closer to 20%. Now at 12. Still low on that. I just don't think the price tag is that great, even though he is under 7K now. Probably close to a historical low for him in recent years, so I get the logic, but I'm just not crazy about Indiana. They're always kind of crowded. They're playing a slower paced team in Brooklyn here. Certainly some chance Brooklyn can't keep up on their side, given the total. So to me, the Pacers, I'm just not there really in any major way.
Yeah, it's hard when teams have everybody in for multiple games in a row. For the Brooklyn side, so Q-tag D'Angelo Russell, Q-tag Ben Simmons, no Watford, no Cam Thomas, no Melton, Lewis, Cam Johnson, Boyan. Essentially no ownership coming into this game, except D'Angelo Russell, who I mentioned is questionable, is 50% owned, and Daron Sharp, the backup center, is 15% owned. What do you want to do with Russell?
I want to play him a lot. I'm getting him at 85% of my lineups right now. I think the main thing that we're seeing with his time in Brooklyn so far, it was something I talked about when he came to Brooklyn and why I was like sort of into him day one, then got a little spooked with him not starting that first game. But he's had like about a 50% assist rate. Lakers time without AD, LeBron. So far in his Nets stint, 54.5% assist rate. Distributing well, keeping his usage route as well around 24, 25%. He's been great. So if you get Simmons out, I feel a little bit better about it still, but I think he's probably a little bit too cheap at this point. Being closer to the field here, I think it's reasonable, but I'll have more. I think he and Cole Anthony are kind of my core plays tonight. It's built around those two and Avdia. I feel like there's going to be in a lot of my lineups naturally, and I don't feel bad about it. He's the only guy I'm getting here, but you have no Cam Thomas, no Cam Johnson. That matters at this point for a Nets team that's just down to nothing at all that can get shots or create shots on this team.
It's brutal. And this could look really crazy if Russell ends up out. It might look really crazy if Ben Simmons is the only guy out. Then you feel a bit better about Sharp. You probably feel a bit better about D'Angelo Russell as well. Do you think you're going to get to anything else here? Like, I tend to think Jalen Wilson's a hair under-owned, but I don't know. These guys stink.
Yeah, got a little Keon Johnson, and I think he would look like a much stronger play if you got one of those guys out too. You're getting a Jalen Wilson at 4%, Fields at 5. I'm low on Daron Sharp too. I'm just like it's kind of Russell or nothing else here for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there's room for somebody to get there, especially if you get Simmons and Russell out, it's just a completely different team. I don't know how they accomplish anything as a basketball team, but at that point, you're looking at like an 8-man rotation, 9-man rotation. So definitely some things hanging to the balance for Brooklyn still.
Yeah, we're going to need a little bit more news for this Brooklyn Nets team. But if D'Angelo Russell is in, he will go down as one of the better plays for today, at least in terms of ownership. Then we get to another gross one. If D'Angelo Russell isn't your cup of tea, maybe Cole Anthony is. The Orlando Magic are 12-point dogs in New York, 209 total. That is the lowest total on today's slate. Is this more Wizards news? Jesus, I hate getting the next day's news. Underdog, seriously, just make it today. Just make it today. Twitter handle. It has to be easy. We'll all follow it. I swear we will. Anyway, Orlando, massive dogs. No Jalen Suggs. No half the team at this point. I really feel bad for them. No Banchero. No Gary Harris. No Franz. No Mo. But we do have 62% ownership coming into Cole Anthony on DraftKings. 4,900 point guard, shooting guard eligible. You just play him, right? Assuming he's in the starting lineup, he's the best play today.
Yeah, I've got him in 81% of my lineups today. I have no gripe. He and D'Angelo Russell just getting him everywhere, and I really don't have a problem with it. Cole Anthony, 31% usage in court time without Franz, without Banchero, without Suggs, and he's played more than 550 possessions too, so that's a pretty stable amount of Cole Anthony this year. 34% usage, 1.24 fan sports minutes is what I'd have him at today. He looks like a great play. I think the big issue with Cole Anthony is like, if he doesn't get his shot today, I don't know how the Magic don't get blown out. So that's sort of a push-pull dynamic with Cole Anthony a little bit. But getting him a ton, and I'm getting Batadze more than the field as well, 15% of my lineups. He's been a 20% guy for his usage, rebound rate, assist rate, and court time without all those guys in the court. Yeah. And he's somebody that, like, he can't get his own shot, but he'll put up shots from every, kind of every situation. So I think for Goga, he's like my number 2 guy here. KCP, I could see the logic for because he, at least historically, has been able to kind of create some usage for himself. But projection-wise, I'm not there. The minutes are okay enough to get there. But I think it's Cole Anthony, Batadze, and really nothing else looks that good, which is kind of insane given you're missing the 3 highest usage guys and the guys who dominate the ball for this team.
Massive pace down spot for both teams. Orlando loses a possession and a half. I have New York losing 3.5. Total at 209.5. Only one other game is sub 220. There's just not a lot here. I have it as the slowest matchup, 94.1 pace. That is 1.5 possessions lower than any other game. It's just really tough. Now, Cole Anthony's only 10% owned on FanDuel at 6,400. I kind of like him given the 10% ownership there. We got to remember, I bet I am not a narrative guy, but I bet Cole Anthony gets up for like a Knicks game in the Garden more so than most given his life history. Not that I think that would be a reason to get him, but I think he's a little underowned on FanDuel and he should be in just about everything on the DraftKings side. The Knicks side, though, is, I guess, a little bit interesting. We need to talk about the news that came in just a couple minutes ago. And that news might change people's minds for some of this. I guess from what I saw in chat, Huck Porty is available for this one, which is leading people to believe that Towns may be out here.
Okay.
We have no ownership coming into the Knicks as of right now. The line is currently sitting at 11.5, so nothing crazy. Look, I don't think the Knicks look good at all if Towns and McBride are in. I don't have any real interest in any of them. Any one of the starting 5 can be in a lineup. I don't see anybody as a priority. Do you like the Knicks if everybody's in?
Towns 5%, maybe a little bit more with Embiid being out now. I could see getting there. He's your only other 10K plus player. He's not picking up ownership. Like, you're going to have Wemby ownership. You're going to have Giannis ownership. You're not really going to have Towns ownership. So I think he's worth it from that respect. Besides that, though, really nothing else for me here. These guys are all really appropriately priced. Brunson, I would say, really aggressively priced for Towns to not be in today as well, with him being at a 9K salary on DraftKings. Josh Hart, too, at 8K. Like, these are really steep price tags where you need somebody to be out. And obviously, these guys have had some success lately with Brunson missing a game. So I think you need Towns out to play these guys. And if not, Towns himself, I think, is an okay play, but still not a great play like he is when he was like in the 9K range.
So let's say Towns happens to be out. $4,500 Precious Achua. Gotta be the dude, right?
I would think so. I mean, it seems like they don't like Sims as much. I mean, they did start him at times earlier in the year, so maybe you could get that. But would think it's a Chua, power forward center at 4,500, getting the big bump up. 0.9 fantasy points per minute normally would look probably one and change with Towns out. So I think it'd be a Chua, yeah.
Achua got the start on the 19th. He played 28 minutes, 32 fantasy points. That is spot on my target score for him right now. You figure if you gave him 28 minutes, call it zero point 0.8 fantasy points per minute, that'd be 22.4 in 28 minutes. At 4,500, that's like 5x. I actually thought that would end up looking a little bit better than that. I don't think he'll be like crazy owned.
I would need to move his rates around. Right now, I have him. Stokastic has him for 15.8 minutes. I would have him at 14.2 with that 15.8. So we're talking about a 0.9 fantasy point per minute pace. I would imagine the rates, I can look them up in a moment, but like I imagine the rates take enough of a jump up without Towns out there that he would look like a 1+ per minute guy. So I would be there,
Well,
especially because
I'm
he's
looking
power
at it
forward
the
center.
other way. Putting
What's
him
that?
on the court with all the starters, I feel like he's going down in rates, not up.
There's so many rebounds to go around though, because Towns has been like what a
Fair.
20% plus, 23% on the year.
So he's playing what, like 5 minutes alongside of Towns most nights?
So with Towns off the court, according to Add More Funds, 338 possessions this year, 20% rebound rate, 20.3%, 16.5% usage, 1.04 fantasy points per minute. So that's about where I would have thought he would land.
What's the true shooting?
The true shooting, I don't actually put on my tab, but I can put it in.
Crazy.
Well, I don't need it. I don't need to import that to change the rates around.
Well, you want to know if it's on fake shooting or not.
Fair. Okay. True
If he's
shooting.
at 85% true shooting, I don't think he's a 1 fantasy point per minute guy.
Okay. No, you know what? Fair enough. Fair enough for it. Save settings. He is at 54% true shooting. So
Okay,
nothing.
so that's like his normal shitty rate. So that is a little bit more interesting. That is the rebounds are there. I was picturing him playing a little bit less than that. Uh, hmm. Yeah, maybe that's a little bit more of a bump. Maybe that's a bit of a pessimistic look. If we go like 0.95 in 28 minutes, that's 26.6. Talking 5.9. Yeah, I mean that extra tenth of a fantasy point per minute might not sound crazy to everybody, but it's enough to take you from like uninteresting to very interesting. So we also need that news. That I'm sure Towns will just get ruled in, and everything we just said is useless anyway. Do you think Towns being out changes anything for anybody else? Do you get to a 9K Brunson? Do you want to get to one of the wings? Where does the rest of it go in your mind?
I mean, Brunson, I think, becomes a different player. He's averaging 1.4 fantasy points per minute with Towns on the or off the court this year, which to me is like you're back to last year Brunson, which has been kind of the big issue for me playing him on most slates. Is that with Towns out there, he's just been a shell of what he was previously. So I think I would change that for him. Josh Hart, the rebounding would look a little bit better. He's only averaged 1.04 fantasy points per minute without Towns, though, so you're not really getting a big jump up. But I think Brunson becomes better, Anunoby closer to playable, Bridges closer to playable. Hard at 8K. I don't know if you still. I don't think you get there. I think you would need Brunson out to play hard at 8K.
Yeah.
Everybody gets a little bit better, and I think Achua. I would cape for Achua being at least a chalky play, if not a good play.
Well, keep your eyes peeled for this one, guys. We're going to need that news. If Towns happens to be out, that will change things up, and we'll be looking a little bit more at a Precious Achua value play. If Towns happens to be in, I don't think we're looking at that much. D'Angelo Russell ruled out. So here it comes, everybody. Here it comes. We're going to have a bit of a day, it seems. Ben Simmons ruled out. Incoming Nets.
Oh, boy.
Incoming Nets value.
We get Reese Beekman. Who do they have? They have nobody left. I mean, it's got to be Keon Johnson, right? Playing point guard, but he's an awful point guard.
I mean, you can kind of pick any names you want at this point.
That's hilarious. That's a funny game. That's
Reese Beekman sounds like a Nintendo or a Nickelodeon cartoon for like kids basketball.
Did you ever there's a show Beekman's World when I at least when I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering why that sounded familiar in my head.
Yeah. It's like they had a good theme too. It's like Beekman's World.
I forgot about that. Well, that's a creepy looking character.
Yes, yeah. The big like Kramer hair, I think is what he had.
He does. He's friends with a rat, it appears.
Yeah, talking puppet rat. That guy's pretty cool. All right.
Oh, I don't think it's a puppet.
Oh,
That's a
is it?
man in a rat
Oh,
furry
it's right. It's a
costume.
dude. Yeah, it's all right. It's a guy. It's like a
Yeah,
fat
that's a
guy.
human
Yeah,
rat.
yeah, it's a fat guy. Yeah.
Wow, they got 5 years out of that one. Oof.
They did,
92 to 98.
they did science on there. It's like a Bill Nye adjacent kind of thing.
Yeah, this is like crystal meth, Bill Nye. Let's get a rat together, but he's a human.
A little Rick and Morty put into that science.
Kinda, yeah. Oh boy. Anyway, because we got to keep it moving here, and there's a lot left to talk about. We got to talk about the sponsor of this show, which is DraftKings Pick Six. And it's very simple. If you want to get $50 in Pick Six credits, all you have to do is click the link in the description to sign up, play $5. You'll get those $50 in Pick Six credits and 1 month of our NFL Plus premium package. It gets you in the door. I assume it could get you the NBA as well. I don't think that it'll matter all that much. If you want NFL, if you want NBA, you can get it for a month for no cost if you're signing up through the link in the description of this video. If you like Pick'em, DraftKings Pick Six is what you're looking for here, and you get a little bit of a bonus while you do it. So click that link, head on in, get yourself the credits, get yourself a month of our sim tools behind the paywall. Milwaukee, 7-point favorites in Toronto, 229 total. We got the news earlier today for the Bucks that Chris Middleton will not be playing for today. We don't know the status of Andre Jackson, who is questionable with back spasms. And for Toronto, we are still waiting on the news of whether or not RJ Barrett plays today. We have 35% ownership coming in to Giannis, around 10 for Taurean Prince, around 10 for Dame, around 10 for Gary Trent. But let's start at the top. How do you feel about Giannis? Is he your preferred pay up?
Yeah, he is. I prefer him to Wemby today. I was getting him 37% with the value opening up. I have to imagine that's going to go up. We're getting to a point now where I think the field's ownership will go up for Giannis as well. That I think it's logical to think about how your lineups look without a pay up option because of the fact that people are going to be able to pay up so easily for it. But him being, a third of the field ownership right now, that feels about right to me getting above that. If he gets about half the field, I think that's where we start asking questions a little bit more. But I think he's my favorite pay up option here. I have him better projected than Wemby straight up. So the fact that he's, reasonable price tag relatively on the slate, I'm okay with it. And I don't know how I'm going to avoid it, but I'll probably try to find some ways to, because it's too easy now to get to Giannis.
Yeah, it's going to be, we're starting to get enough value to make Giannis plus Wemby very easy to do. What do you want to do with the rest of these guys? Do you have any interest in Dame, in the value of Taurean Prince, and the value of Gary Trent? Maybe somebody else that's on this Bucks team?
Now, I was light on Lillard anyway. I did see him in some of the top Stokastic sim lineups without my projections on it, so I don't want to fully poo-poo him, but 9% ownership, I think, is more than enough. I got him in 1% of my lineups. I could probably try to boost it if I really want to, but I'm not sure that I will. I think with the Giannis ownership coming up, I think Lillard gains a little more merit as a tournament pivot, where if you get him right, he outscores Giannis, or at least, outscores him in real-life points, then gives you the fantasy upside. I think there's a pathway to that making sense, so I might try to boost him a little bit here if I don't get him naturally. I was getting Prince a lot. I imagine that just goes away now. I was getting him 15% compared to the field's 10. So, nothing crazy there in terms of a stand, but he's now probably a much lesser value than he'll be in Brooklyn, Philadelphia. I mean, there's going to be a lot better value floating around.
Yeah, we're about to start getting some heavy duty value plays in the near future. You know where those value plays aren't? Toronto. 8% ownership to Quickly, 7 to Jakob Poeltl, essentially none to Barnes. Now, we do need the Barrett status. If he happens to be out, these guys will look a little better. The only guy that I want from Toronto, though, would be Emmanuel Quickly, who I think is a hair under owned, even still.
Yeah, I'm getting 2x the field on Quickly, a little bit over 2x the field on Poeltl, so I'm with both those guys. Quickly's been great on the year. He's averaging 1.1 fantasy points per minute, 28% usage, 43% assist rate. If Barrett's in, you do expect that all to come down, but the way my projections work, they're all going to kind of come down in equal ratios, so I kind of let that happen naturally. But I think Quickly at 7K, like he's not exactly Barrett and Barnes in terms of his production on the year, but he's not so far off in terms of like how many possessions he takes for himself. So I think he's underpriced and those guys are overpriced. They should probably meet somewhere in the middle. So I think Quickly looks good. And Poeltl, I'm not crazy about, but I think he's priced well. He probably will go away from some of the value opening up if I had to guess. I think he's an okay play at under 10% owned.
I know Quickly's going to go nuts today. I can feel it.
He's
I can
good,
feel
man.
it.
he's a nice player. He'd be better fantasy wise if he had nobody around him and just could put up an insane, like, all the assists, all the usage game. But he plays good basketball. Like, I think he plays good basketball with these guys too, and their dominant usage. He could shoot better. He needs to shoot better on the
I was
year.
gonna say 48% true shooting on the season is tough.
Yeah, we're talking DeJounte Murray though. He's better than him right now.
That is a low bar, dude. Very low bar. Keep your eyes peeled on that news, though. Now we get to the fun one. San Antonio Spurs, 3-point favorites in Chicago, 236 total. Second fastest game, highest total. Everybody that's normally around for San Antonio is available today. 30% ownership to Wemby, down to 27 on Vassell. So as I told you guys this morning, that number was coming down. 10 to Chris Paul, single digits to everybody else. How you feeling about Wemby? Because 11-1 doesn't have the ability to get into that power forward spot like Giannis does, but boy, oh boy, does he project well.
Yeah, I was getting less Wemby than Giannis. Was getting 15% compared to the 35% plus for Giannis. I think that might move a little bit more. I think I'm going to get closer with just, again, the value opening up here. Wemby, I don't have Barrett badly projected to have him at 57 fantasy points, a little bit lower than Stokastic, which has Wemby just shy of 60. But I still have no issue with him. Pace up spot. I think that Wemby's ownership always feels a little bit high for my projections for him, which is kind of the issue I have, but he hits the ceiling so frequently that it's hard to ignore. So yeah, I'm okay with Wemby. If you want to be with the field on him, 30% is where the field's at right now. Probably going to be closer to 35, 40. I had to guess with the ownership when that updates. I think it's not crazy to get there, but I would have to kind of force my way to it. So I like Wemby, but less than Giannis is the best way to sum it up.
Yeah, I think that we're going to be getting to a lot of Wemby and a lot of Giannis very easily now. Remember, one, the Embiid ownership is going away at a center spot. Two, we're creating a lot more value. And now the ability to get to the clear top two dudes. And let's not forget, it's not out of the realm of possibility that the 10K Karl Anthony Towns is also not a part of this slate. And when we're creating a little bit of a gap, making the next, I mean, here's where it really is in my projections. And we can quibble over where somebody should be in general. Let's say Giannis and Wemby are both at 60, just generically speaking. Embiid's gone now. Towns is potentially gone. The only guy I have in the 50s at that point is Cade at 51. Otherwise, everybody would be sub that number. It's going to be a race to get Wemby and Giannis into your lineup combined for a lot of people. And based on the amount of value that I think we're going to have, I think it's going to be pretty easy.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that, again, that's what won recently with, as Josh pointed out, a Jokic lineup with Wemby. So, yeah, like I think there's a lot of things that are going to push people towards playing that, which just, it sucks. It's so easy to do. And I think that's the issue. Things get too easy to do and you don't want to do them in a tournament.
It's going to be fun to see. I like Vassell. I think Chris Paul's a hair underowned. I think Harrison Barnes is the most underowned guy on San Antonio. The Barnacle of the Bay is 2% owned right now. I don't understand. I don't look. Let me be clear. He's not great. He's like a 0.8 guy on his best day. 33 minutes last time out. 32 minutes the game before that. No one played big minutes on New Year's Eve. Barnes played 34 the game before that. If Harrison Barnes is going to play 30 minutes or more today, 2% ownership, small forward, power forward, you need 30 fantasy points out of him at 4K. He should not be 2% owned. He should be 10. Big fan of Barnes. Big fan of Barnes.
It's hard with Vassell and Sohan, and I feel like there's just, and Keldon, like they got all of their gunners that are there. So I think that makes it a little bit tougher. I get what you're saying.
They were all in yesterday or 2 days ago. 33 minutes from Barnes.
Yeah. I mean, look, Stokastic has him for 26.8. So if you're talking about a 4-minute swing, that does matter.
29th, they were all in. He played 34 minutes. They gave Champagne 11. They gave Castle 8. They gave Zach Collins 7. They gave Keldon 17. They jammed these dudes. I don't know what's changing, but it appears they're going back to Harrison Barnes. And if that's the case, he is free-ish. I don't like riding for him, but he is the Barnacle of the Bay, so he's a hero in these parts.
On memories, if nothing else.
It's very true. Bring back COVID. RJ Barrett, available to play on a minutes restriction. I assume that restriction is he won't play 48. And then no change on Towns and Deuce McBride. So the Spurs side of this game, I think we agree, is pretty interesting, given the total, given the matchup, whatever. The highest owned guy for the Bulls right now is 7% owned Lonzo Ball, which I assume is exactly what everybody was expecting to hear. Levine's 2. Vooch is 1. Kobe White's 1. Patrick Williams is 2. Josh Giddey is 1. You gonna get to the Bulls side of this one? How do we balance it out?
See, I didn't get a share of anybody besides Lonzo Ball, who I got 5% of my lineups with, which is under the field. The issue is like, so you have Ayo Dosunmu out. These guys are now priced for the situation where Dosunmu vacates some assists, some usage, some minutes for Giddey and Kobe White. So like, I get that. They're now all priced for that. And San Antonio is not like a high octane matchup going against them. It is a pace down. It is a defense that's at least league average going against them. So I'm not crazy about the spot. I think you're naturally going to get a little bit more of them because of people trying to rotate around the cheap pieces that are going to be very concentrated chalk on the slate. So I think you'll get more bulls naturally with that. But if you're going to play a lot of Spurs, it does make sense to put a bull with it, and you have guys with upside. But the price tags are tough. Like, you really just got to take a swing here. I don't even have anybody of like a 4.7x value of the key guys, and we're talking a pretty big breath from 5x then.
Yeah, it's really unappealing. I have San Antonio gaining 3.3 possessions over their average here. So massive pace up spot, pace down spot for Chicago. Yeah, I want the San Antonio side in a big way. However, like if you have a lineup that has, Vassell and Wemby, I really don't in any way hate the idea of having Levine or White or Giddey or something on the opposite side and having a little bit of the Chicago team. Because I think the starters should be, around 5% owned. I do think they're like very tinily, that's a word that I'm going with. You know what I mean? Very, very small amount of ownership. We'll go tinily. We're just going to put that in. Merriam-Webster, if you're listening, go ahead and lock that in for 2025. I like getting one of those starters if I'm getting to a bit of a San Antonio stand in a lineup, but they don't look good in any way, unfortunately for us. Man, the injuries are just getting so old. Dallas, Memphis. Neither one of these teams are going to look like themselves. Dallas is without Kyrie Irving for 1 to 2 weeks. They're going to be without Luka for all of that time as well. 25% ownership coming into PJ Washington on DraftKings. Same on FanDuel. 15 to Derek Lively on DraftKings. Single digits to everybody else. Now, Spencer Dinwiddie is 5,600 on FanDuel and 30% owned. Clay is 20% owned on FanDuel. But the DraftKings side, the only ownership is really coming into PJ and Lively. And I do not agree with the Lively ownership. PJ makes some sense to me.
I'm getting Lively above the field right now, 21%. I think that's going to move around because of the value opening up, but he's 5,300 projected for 26 minutes. That's the logic there, but it wasn't really a big stand, just kind of one you naturally get because of the price tag. I do have a pro stand on Quentin Grimes. Grimes really filled it up in the second half the other day when they benched Dinwiddie, which I thought was odd. I don't know if Dinwiddie will even start this game. I assume he will. But Grimes put up like 20 points in a quarter in that spot. So like, he's had high usage here. He's averaged about 1 fantasy point per minute with Luka and Kyrie off the court. I'm at 1.06 today. The usage is up, 20% usage, 10% rebound rate, 15% assist rate. And the minutes seem stable for him. So I think Grimes, to me, as a shooting guard small forward, offers you some flexibility, reasonable price tag, and theoretically some upside. PJ Washington I'm getting as well. Nothing else here. So Grimes, I would take as a stand. Lively, I don't really care about. Washington probably comes down a little bit too with the value opening up.
Yeah, I definitely prefer Grimes to Dinwiddie by a mile. I do think Grimes is like a hair under-owned here. 10% optimal, 18% boom for me. I do think Najee Marshall is sneaky at no ownership. He's been out for the suspension. With them missing guys, like we don't really know how many minutes they're going to play him. Like, would it be all that surprising if he got to 28 today? It wouldn't shock me at all. They have some playing time to go around. And at that point in time, he's a 0.9 to a full fantasy point per minute guy, small forward, power forward eligibility, 4,600. He's not going to get clicked on. And I think the more likely scenario is that he plays like 22, 23 minutes. But I do see a path where he could grab a couple extra minutes and be interesting. Because if they pull the plug on somebody else here, it's not all that crazy to think that he steps into that role. So at 1% owned, I like him as a GPP pivot, but not any sort of priority. Then we get to Memphis. So Santi Aldama out, Desmond Bane doubtful, Yuki Kawamura probable, Luke Kennard questionable, Ja Morant out, Marcus Smart out, Vince Williams out, GG Jackson out. 10% ownership to Jalen Wells, 20% ownership to Triple J. Call it 15 on John Conchar, 15 on Brandon Clark, single digits everybody else. By the way, on FanDuel, Wells, Jackson, and Conchar are all 30 plus, and Pippen and Kennard are both around 20. I like Triple J here more than I like anything else. He's probably going to look even better now, given what news we've just gotten. It's a little bit more cost effective. Maybe you don't want to go to Giannis in a lineup and you have Wemby and you turn that Giannis spot into Triple J and save some salary. Could see it. He's the guy I like the most. I think the ownership to Wells and Clark makes sense. I don't really like anything else here for Memphis.
Yeah, I like Jaren Jackson enough here. And as Josh mentioned, I think it's easy to get more now because of the value opening up. And he's an easily, nicely projected guy. I have him a little bit lower than Stokastic, where they have met 48.1. I've met 46.5. But he looks great enough in my projections. He's going to come in naturally more. I'm up on Pippen a little bit. I have 9% of him compared to 4% for the field. Not a big stand there, but there's a good opportunity to go around with no Bane, no Morant in there. And he has produced about a 1.1-ish and change pace, fantasy points per minute, that is. So I think he's okay. I'm low on the other stuff here. I'm not getting a lot of Wells, not getting a lot of Conchar, not getting a lot of Kennard, getting 5% Brandon Clark, and that probably goes down now. I think it's kind of Pippen or Jackson and nothing else here for me. I get why these guys are coming in for other people, but they don't project that well for me, so I'm not getting them naturally. I'm not going to get them, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I have Clark and Wells dead neutral to their ownership. 10% optimal, 10% owned, 12% optimal, 13% owned. So it's not like they're jumping off the page for me. Triple J would be the guy that I'd want to get to a little bit more just because of the ceiling. I mean, he just soaks up usage when Morant and Bane aren't around. I mean, he becomes like a really ridiculous, he becomes like LaMelo Ball, like 35% usage, dude. It's nuts to see. Uh, and he gets to go up against a lesser version of himself in PJ Washington, which is always fun.
Oh, so much lesser. That's unfair to Jaren Jackson. I get what you're saying. That's unfair. That's mean.
I agree. Well, no. Wait, mean to who?
Jaren Jackson's won Defensive Player of the Year. PJ Washington, well, the thing was like Dallas thought
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Jaren Jackson is like the billionaire version of PJ Washington.
the billionaire, yes.
I want to give all of the plaudits to Jaren Jackson here. I don't want to undersell him in any way. I love that dude.
Yeah, that's a lot. Ask a lot of PJ Washington, I think, on the comp, but I get what you're saying.
By the way, Corn Doggy gave us the super chat of, my wife wants to know why Josh is a big fan of Ray J. I do not know what to tell her outside of you're a fan of his work. I mean, that's true. That is it. I am a fan of his work, both on the big screen and on the big screen, depending on which kind of work we're talking about. Musically,
it was a banger.
Musically, love it. TV show, love it. Home video edition, loved that one as well. So triple threat for old Ray J.
And he's also a tripod, so it works. Triple threat.
Yeah, he sure is. Let's finish this one off with probably the least interesting game before we get to live before lock. Clippers, 2-point dogs in Minnesota, 214 total. To the 2,200 of you that are here, we have 200 likes. Let's reward this live before lock crew. Let's get that number up to 350 if we can. For the Clippers, welcome back, Kawhi Leonard. You're 7,900 on DraftKings and completely unrosterable. And so is the rest of your teammates. 1% ownership to Powell, Harden, Zoo, and Dunn. Everybody else with a 0. I don't know how you click anybody from the Clippers. Maybe Zoo is reasonable to me because he doesn't really get affected by anybody coming back. He's just sort of the center that plays the minutes. I don't know how you get to anything for the Clippers though.
Yeah, Kawhi playing 20 minutes kind of kills the value, the projection for everybody else here. You can play Harden, I think, at 1% owned. You could play Powell at 1% owned. Zubac 1% owned. Like, I think that's an appropriate amount to get to all those guys. But really, Kawhi coming in just upsets everything. Those guys aren't priced yet for a situation where Kawhi is playing any minutes, let alone 20 or so.
I'm glad Kawhi's back. I hope he stays healthy. I sort of like this Clippers team. And I like Kawhi. He's really good at basketball when he's around, and I hope that he can be around more. The league is better when he gets to play more. Then we get to Minnesota, a team that everybody is down on except for me, apparently. 10% ownership to Jaden McDaniels, 10% ownership to Naz Reid, low single digits to everybody else, which really doesn't surprise me. This is one of the slowest games on the slate. It's the second lowest total. These guys don't have anybody out. All of their salaries are basically where they should be. But I would argue that Anthony Edwards is a bit underowned at 5%.
Yeah, same page as you. I can see the tournament upside in Ant, especially now that the chalk is going to concentrate on different pay up guys, and he can give you that upside and be your late night hammer. So I don't mind that. Wasn't getting there before the sims that we ran, so that is what it is. Naz Reid, Jaden McDaniels, okay plays on paper. They probably matter a lot less now. There's going to be more legit value out there. But again, the value plays that were okay value before the chalk value opens up. sometimes worth some stabs. So I'll just highlight those guys. But nothing else really the big play here. Like Josh mentioned, low pace game, defensively minded game on both sides. Hard to love anything here, really.
Allrat with the super chat. When do you jump on Kawhi? Before everybody else? I mean, if I'm going to jump on Kawhi, it's definitely going to be before everybody else. I don't want to be the caboose for this one. But I mean, we got to see him have any ability to play any additional minutes. He's 7,900 right now. There's no path to thinking that you could roster him at 7,900 yet. Once we start to see those minutes creep up and the price start to come down a little bit, there will be like a natural convergence where you start to see it and you start to think like, if he gets 30, then he can be in a real lineup. It's not right now. And I can't imagine they're in any rush to stretch him, but who the hell knows? Tell the people where to find you.
You can follow me at Chris Spags. Check out my stream before this one, Monday to Friday at 4 p.m. at Splash Play NBA. Talk about my projections, compare them to Stokastic stuff. Look at some sims, look at some prop markets. I'm there for you Monday to Friday at 4 p.m. And good luck, guys. I hope it's a great slate for you.
There we go, everybody. NBA Live Before Lock coming up next. They're going to have all of the updates for the crazy news that came out over the past hour. And then Greg and I will be back at 7 for what I would only imagine is more crazy news to deal with for late swaps. So good luck, everybody. Stay on this stream. NBA Live Before Lock coming up next.
Yeah, we're done. Yeah, you.
What is happening, everybody? It's time for another NBA Live Before Lock, and as is tradition, players get ruled out right before we're about to start the show, although we did have at least a few minutes grace period here, Eric, so I was able to get some lineups rebuilt already for DraftKings. I got FanDuel Sims running right now as well, but yeah, I mean, I do prep hours in advance, get ready for this just for things to change, as per usual, 8 minutes before the show is going to start, and some big ones today. Joel Embiid ruled out. We also had D'Angelo Russell ruled out. Both players who, even though they were questionable on the injury report, I don't know about you, Eric, I thought they were going to end up playing today. So that's something I had to rebuild lineups for, but we've got projections updated. We've got ownership updated. We're ready to run the show and answer any questions you guys have. So do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also shout out to DraftKings. They are sponsoring the show today, DraftKings Pick 6. So if you guys are in a legal state that has DraftKings Pick 6, go ahead and play it. Eric could play where he lives. I can't play where I live. I'm waiting for it to come to New Jersey so I could test it out. I'm sure you guys are already up on DraftKings. I assume it's very unlikely that any of our viewers don't already have a DraftKings account. So just go ahead, check out DraftKings Pick 6 if you haven't already. We also have projections for it all up on our website. So even if you just have any projection to our site, any subscription to our site, it comes with DraftKings Pick 6 projection. So go check that out. Eric, how are you doing today? And then we'll start talking about the news that has come out.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Excited about this slate. I mean, you're talking to me about, hours of prep or whatever. How about getting all of your betting takes the night before and then just random news less than 24 hours later where it's just like, oh, okay, so that's obviously a very, very different situation. But generally why I tend to lean on overs on that video. And then a lot of my underplay comes from Portfolio EV, from, obviously some of the pick'em stuff that we have over at Stokastic too. So, I mean, it is all in fluctuation. And I think it's going to get even messier because I'm quite certain Karl Anthony Towns doesn't play today, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Humboldt Parker, I see you over. Actually, he's not going to be able to hear, so this was actually a stupid solution on my part. He says in the chat he can't hear anything. It is probably because you have it muted over in playback. So I was going to say unmute us, but obviously he can't hear us. So he is stuck not being able to hear anything at the moment. But if somebody wanted to type in chat for him to unmute it, that's almost certainly what it is because other people say they're able to hear. There we go.
Jordan Klein was a failure. It's okay. Jordan Klein, he was too busy talking shit before the show. He couldn't actually perform and do his job. It's fine.
Yeah, it's a frequent issue with the performance on that one. Well, let's go and start talking about today's slate and two big pieces of news that just came out. We've got no D'Angelo Russell for the Nets, in addition to no Ben Simmons. And then we've also got no Joel Embiid for the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm going to ask you this first, Eric. Of those two, and we're going to talk about both of them, obviously, but of those two pieces of news, which is more impactful to your lineups?
Brooklyn. Brooklyn is just taking off in a crazy way. Tyrese Martin specifically, if you end up getting him starting today, it's going to look like really, really, really good stuff. If we don't get Tyrese Martin starting, if it ends up being Keon Johnson, Williams, Wilson, Clowney, Claxton, something of that capacity, it's probably going to just be get to some more of those guys. But specifically Tyrese Martin, if he ends up being as prominent as what he's showing up in the tools, I mean, that's going to be a big deal for sure. But I do think the combination of Yabusele and Maxey, it's going to be a big one for me. I think that they look fantastic without Joel Embiid on the floor. Paul George looks fantastic without Joel Embiid on the floor. So it's probably going to be getting the culmination of them. But I mean, Keon Johnson and Tyrese Martin are in absolutely everything that I just ran.
Yeah, Tyrese Martin for sure. Top overall value option on the slate. As things stand right now, that is assumed that he starts. We also have him projected, Eric, for nearly 80% ownership. So he's, I'm running FanDuel Sims right now. I've already got DraftKings Sims run as well. What do you make him relative to his ownership, though? Because he's clearly a great option. You want to be playing him in cash games. Relative to his ownership, do you think he should be higher owned than that even? Do you want to be overweight to him? Are you going to be about even with the field? Or are you going to come in underweight to Tyrese Martin? Keep in mind, this is relative to him being projected for 78% ownership.
Yeah, I'd have 100% right now.
Okay. Don't hate that at all.
If he starts, I think I'm just going to be figuring out what to do in 7 other lineup spots.
Fair. I don't have any issue with that whatsoever. As far as other players on the Nets, Anybody else, obviously not as important as Tyrese Martin, but any other big gainers from the Nets that are going to be massively important to your lineups, sans D'Angelo Russell and Ben Simmons?
Yeah, and also sans Cam Johnson. That's the other big one where you get all the usage and all the land going towards whomever is on the floor. Keon Johnson's the next guy. Just positionality helps out a little bit for him too. Point guard, shooting guard, that's going to find him in some shooting guard spots, and I think that's fine. Thought Cole Anthony would end up being like Hulk slam all in kind of stuff. He's still looking fantastic and still going to be in a large part of my portfolio, but I think Keon Johnson, $400 away from him, looks pretty decent in that game environment for Brooklyn specifically. Day'Ron Sharpe is going to be somebody who shows up in some lineups. I feel like we have a Day'Ron Sharpe conversation every single show now where it's just like, all right, he's sub 4K. If there's a blowout, which is always likely when it's Brooklyn, and he gets 8-10 minutes in a fourth quarter, you're going to want Day'Ron Sharpe at sub 4K. But I think center is interesting where you had two mid-range plays that really stood out earlier in the day. And now we have to start thinking about Andre Drummond too. Andre Drummond is 4,100. And even if he doesn't start, because I'm assuming that we get, Yabusele there in some capacity, but maybe we don't. Maybe they do go, Maxi Oubre if he's back. They go PG-13, Caleb Martin, Andre Drummond. But 4,100 Andre Drummond, I think, is going to be like the talking point once that starting lineup comes out, if he's in it.
Are there any contrarian options you like from the Nets? So we have Day'Ron Sharpe, who's a good value option, not quite contrarian. He's pulling some ownership, nothing crazy though, right around 20% for Day'Ron Sharpe. You got Tyrese Martin, chalk piece who you and I both like. We've also got a chalk piece in Keon Johnson, who you and I both like, although I prefer Tyrese Martin and Day'Ron Sharpe as well, with Day'Ron Sharpe's price point being where it's at. Are there any lower owned players from the Nets you like before we move on to the Philadelphia 76ers?
Yeah, Claxton. I mean, Claxton is going to be kind of an outlier piece on this center slate. Again, we had two mid-range guys in Zach Edey and Derek Lively. They looked incredible, but now with all the value coming in, we have Victor Wembanyama 11-1. Giannis at least has power forward eligibility. That's going to just have him showing up in everybody's lineups. But I think Wemby, especially going up against Chicago, I mean, you just look at his props across the board. He's got like a 56.5 fantasy point projection at all the pick'em sites. He's got, what is his projection for us right now? Yeah, north of 55 fantasy points. I mean, he just looks so good with a ton of value getting added to the fray. And so now center, you're going to see low ownership come in on the likes of Duren, whose minutes have been all over the place, some weird game scripts for Detroit, some weird injury stuff for Detroit. And then Nick Claxton, 6,200 going up against Miles Turner. I even think Miles Turner, 6,400, somebody that I want to get to. Usage has been up of late for him as well. So Nick Claxton, probably the most interesting guy that I have in 12% of my lineups as a contrarian piece. But I mean, he's 6.5% owned. So it's not that distantly, I'm not deterring myself so much from the field, but goes hand in hand. Day'Ron Sharpe's more popular because he's 3,800 and we know the fantasy point per minute rate can go nuts. Well, if that doesn't work out for the field, I bet Nick Claxton does.
Yeah, hey, I don't hate Nick Claxton at all. I have him in a little more than 10% of lineups. That is slightly more than what the field has, modestly priced at $6,200. There's usage available for the Brooklyn Nets. So I think that's definitely somebody who is a reasonable shout out there. He's one I'm overweight to the field to. Let me see. I'm going to go into the Sims here and I'm going to filter by Brooklyn Nets players to see if there's any other really low owned guys that I'm getting to here. Another one, Jalen Wilson. Jalen Wilson, $4,500. He's only 11% owned. Should Keon Johnson, Day'Ron Sharpe, like Tyrese Martin, clearly a better value play, but at a similar price point, like should he have 7x the ownership of Jalen Wilson? Probably not. So Jalen Wilson at $4,500, good positionality, small forward, power forward. I like him at 11% ownership as well, Eric. I know it's somebody that you and I have rostered in the past too.
Yep, I think that he definitely makes sense. I mean, it's also going to be very dependent on what that starting lineup ends up being. So, like, it's not a bridge we have to cross right now because that game's still a ways out. We've got the playback show that you and Josh are going to be doing afterwards where you guys can kind of cover exactly how it pans out. But, I mean, Zaire Williams, even if he starts 5,200, do we really want to be getting there with it? There's just a lot of weird ways that this can pan out. I will say, just have a backup plan in mind if Tyrese Martin isn't available, especially if you're building like one or two lineups. You don't want to get, locked up with Maxi, locked up with, Paul George, Andre Drummond, Yabusele. There's going to be lineup spots that are used up early. Cade Cunningham, a big one for me there in the Detroit spot against Portland. I want to make sure that if I don't get Tyrese Martin starting, that I have an exit route later on in that, if I'm building out one lineup or three lineups, if you're watching this along with the show. But I'm making 177 lineups on DK. I'm not going to think about it too much until after we get the starting lineup.
Yeah, Nets starting lineup, very much in flux. They've gone to, all kinds of different starting lineups this year. There's always guys who are in and out. These are all the players who the Nets have active today. It is not very many. They've got Claxton, Keon Johnson, Jalen Wilson, Noah Clowney, Day'Ron Sharpe, Zaire Williams, Tyrese Martin, Reese Beckman, Tosan Boyman, and then you've got Dariq Whitehead, who's in. So you got 10 total players who the Nets have to go to, and most of them are just dog shit guys as well. Even the fact that we're talking about Tyrese Martin as a massive chalk play here, he's somebody who's probably not going to be relevant in the NBA in a couple of years. It's just, here is a cheap guy who the Nets have played in bigger minutes in some of these spots in the past, but it doesn't mean they have to do it again today. I do think he starts, but if he doesn't, it's definitely a completely different conversation. He would still be viable to me coming off the bench, Eric, but definitely somebody who I would be trying to jump ship on to some extent. He would definitely be in much less of my lineups if he comes off the bench. What would you be doing with Tyrese Martin if that Nets starting five comes out and he's not in it?
Yeah, I would still have some. I think it's exactly what you said. I'd still have some. He's got great positionality, shooting guard, small forward. He's 4K. And then a blowout, I project him in the lineup. So I think that helps exponentially in terms of all right, there's a game that we're expecting to blow out anyway. And then there are extra outs for him to potentially get there. But he would be way overowned. He's north of 60, 70% everywhere you look. We've got him at 67.5% in our last run 3 minutes ago. So for me, I think he just would be way too popular for a single entry for building out a couple of lineups. He would be somebody I'd be vehemently against getting to in the event that he's coming off the bench, because it just adds another layer of unknowns to things. And we saw Zaire Williams play quite a few minutes. We saw Keon Johnson play north of 34, I think it was last time out. So I feel much more secure with the Brooklyn guys, specifically Keon Johnson being out there a lot. They just don't have a lot of ball handling here, absent Russell, absent, everybody basically. Ben Simmons, Cam Thomas, Cameron Johnson. It's just going to get really, really thin. So Keon Johnson, I think probably the guy I'm the most secure about being the number 2 guy in terms of projection. Or the number 2 guy in terms of lineup spots taken up for me. But Tyrese Martin, priority right now, would not be a priority if he doesn't start.
We've got a question here from JEW. It says he's playing 40 lineups in the 100K to first over on DK. So the big top-heavy contest is, 71,000 entries or something like that.
Yeah.
His thoughts on locking in a few players like Martin and Anthony and letting the Sims build around the rest of them. So the issue I have with that is I don't have close to 100% of Cole Anthony. Tyrese Martin is my most rostered player, but I'm not that much different than the field on him. It's because of how popular he is. But I've got Tyrese Martin in 3/4 of my lineups. I've currently got Cole Anthony in a little bit less than half of my lineups. So once again, 2 guys I like, a whole good, but I don't know that I want to have 100% of Cole Anthony and Tyrese Martin, especially if you consider that these guys do occupy at least some of the same position, and there are other guys that I like as backcourt players as well. So I wouldn't, if I was playing 40 lineups, I wouldn't go 100% on those 2 guys. I honestly wouldn't go 100% on anybody for this late if you had to pick one guy. Eric said he's going 100% Tyrese Martin. I've got a lot of him. I don't have quite that much. I think you're better off just building lineups through the Sims and playing the top 40 of them. I don't think you have to lock anybody in. Eric, I know you said you are locking in Tyrese Martin, Cole Anthony, another chalk option on the slate. It seems like Jalen Suggs gets hurt once a week or something like that, and it seems really devastating, but he usually comes back right away. But this time it actually ended up being a little more serious. Gets wheelchaired off the court. He is going to be out today. Cole Anthony starting at point guard with all of the other injuries to the Orlando Magic. He certainly looks good, Eric, but is he somebody that you're considering playing in 100% of your lineups like JEW is?
No, there's got a 209 total. It's a total that I disagree with for what it's worth. I'm on the over there, but I do think Cole Anthony at 4,900 looks awesome. It's just, we're going to have other players that look awesome as well. And Cole Anthony's kind of just sitting there staring at you in the face. It makes sense to be playing Cole Anthony. He's projected for 6x if you care about such things. The thing I care about is that we got a piece in Tyrese Martin. We're going to have something else, I think, show up, whether it's Yabusele or Drummond, that are going to look incredible early on. I just can't imagine I'd be playing 100% of Cole Anthony there. I will say the nice thing is that he's in the game that I think has the most interest for tournament plays. This is just kind of the case for the Knicks every single time out. My nuke of the night comes from that game. We have a big glaring Q tag in Karl Anthony Towns and all the rates and how he affects everything down the line for everybody. You also have Deuce McBride, who's questionable, hasn't played the last few, had the weird scratch. We all know that happened, but he hasn't played yet in 2025. And there could be limitations there where you start to really see some interesting stuff that Tibbs has to go to. But we know how much he wants to play his main guys. Those main guys all look unbelievable despite the game environment in the event that Cat sits.
Yep, definitely one of the pieces of news that we are waiting on. We'll touch on the Philadelphia 76ers next, but I first want to let you guys know that this is what it is that we're waiting on here. We've got Cat. He's questionable to play. So Karl Anthony Towns, his status is in doubt for tonight. We've got Kelly Oubre also questionable. So that's potential. By the way, the Kelly Oubre news, we should be getting in the next, 5-10 minutes or something like that. So that news is going to be breaking very soon. One of the reasons, too, that I actually wanted to try to push back the 76ers conversation a little bit, because I assume that Oubre news is going to be coming imminently. So he's questionable. Cat is questionable. We're probably going to be getting the Cat news. Actually, we've seen this scenario multiple times over the course of you and I doing these shows. I'm going to make a prediction right now. Karl Anthony news update, 7:01 p.m. Eastern time.
Probably. That sounds about right. I don't think he's playing today for what it's worth.
Yeah, so Cat, he is questionable dealing with a leg injury. He's been questionable a lot as of late, but has generally played through it, but questionable.
And Brunson, who's been questionable more. Brunson's the one who's been questionable more with that calf, but he's off the injury report, so pretty wild. Yeah,
Brunson's been questionable a lot. Cat's been on the injury report a handful of times this year. So we'll see. The Knicks did sit Brunson at times when he was dealing with that calf injury, which is kind of out of character for Tom Thibodeau teams. Maybe it's an indication that Cat a little bit more likely to sit this time. But anyway, Oubre's questionable. We've got Luke Kennard questionable as well. And
Kelly Oubre in.
It for actual. Sorry, what's that?
Oubre in.
There we go. All right. So delayed just the right amount of time. Start talking about the 76ers. There's no other key players on the injury report. However, with that said, we do still have the Nets starting lineup, which could literally be just about anything.
Andre Drummond out. What the hell? What the hell?
Drummond out.
Oh,
there we go. No Drummond today. All right. So now we can start talking about the Philadelphia 76ers because we just got some news on top of news. So
oh my God.
Andre Drummond is going to be out. So this pretty much locks Yabusele into the starting center spot. It's been a situation where when Joel Embiid has been out this year, they've gone to Drummond at times at center. They've gone to Yabusele at center at times. There's also been times Drummond has started at center and Yabusele started at power forward. But now, no Drummond, no Joel Embiid. How good does Yabusele look as a value option now, Eric?
I mean, he's the best play of the slate right now. I can't imagine that there's a better value play. We already had a pretty nice optimal percentage on him, nearly 40%, I think. You know, whether it ended up being Yabusele or Drummond starting, if they go to Oubre back in the starting lineup, Caleb Martin stays in that starting lineup. We know Paul George and Tyrese Maxey are going to start. So it just became a question of how they wanted to do it between Martin, Drummond, and Yabusele. This just cleans it up. I mean, it just gives him all the run. There's nobody that really is going to stop Yabusele from being out there a majority of the center minutes. I do have to at least think about what is Phoenix going to do? Like, you're seriously going to still start Mason Plumlee here and then have Nurkic off the bench? Like, Nurkic is going to eviscerate anybody in that second unit. I mean, look at who's going to even play center minutes. Justin Edwards? Adam Bona? Like, this is just such a weird backup situation. Like, Yabusele, I'm going to project for like 34, 35 minutes now.
See, he's played games without Embiid and Drummond this year, correct?
Yes.
All right, let's pull up some of those games.
Because, I mean, I just don't know who else they would trust to be out there playing center minutes. I mean, Bona is, he's got to be in line for some minutes there. I mean, maybe at 3K, he's even in play. He played 17 minutes against Cleveland on the 13th, November 13th, I think. Let me find if this is a game where they were both off. Embiid, because we know he wasn't there at the beginning of the season, of course, with all the weirdness. So you have a better chance of finding one of those games early on in the year than you do middle December on.
Okay, so there's a start last week for Yabusele where Embiid was out, but Drummond was in for that one. All right, here we've got a stretch of games in the end of November where we saw starts for Yabusele. Let's see, was Drummond out for any of those? Looking at games end of November.
November 13th, I think, was the one that I looked at where I think I just put a type in and had it search for me.
Here's a relevant one.
Okay.
So we had a game against the Detroit Pistons where Embiid was out, and it was the game where Drummond started to hurt his toe and only played 3 minutes.
Okay.
He actually only got 24.5 minutes out of Yabusele in that game, though.
All right. So I just pulled up against Cleveland, which obviously we know there's a lot of size on the other side of that one. They had Bona play 17 minutes. Yabusele played 31, but it was a game that blew out. They were down infinity entering that fourth quarter. They ended up losing 114-106. So it stayed somewhat intact, but still had 31 minutes for Yabusele. He ended up closing out that game, played the entire final rotation. But Bona, I'm going to put him in for like 16 minutes. I'm going to put 32 in for Yabusele, and I'm going to call it a day. He's probably going to end up being my highest owned value piece now.
Yeah, I think Yabusele looks really, really strong. He already looked good, but now he looks even better. Does this have any impact on... So guys like Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, they also clearly benefit in the usage department in the absence of Joel Embiid. Any real changes there, or is just these are guys we liked anyway? Still like them.
Yeah, we still like them. I don't think anything changes. I mean, the thing that changes is the rebound rate potentially for a Caleb Martin. Give him a little bit of a boost up. Paul George, a little bit of a boost up in that regard, too. Wasn't ever going to be a premier thing for me with Maxey and Oubre. Like, I do think Oubre at his current ownership looks pretty good to me. We'll see if people end up there at 5,200 shooting guard only. But Maxey, such a high upside option here, independent of everybody. Phoenix is completely befuddled right now. Defensively, they got nothing without Royce O'Neal out on the floor. He's going to be out for this one. They're putting Ryan Dunn in. They're doing the Bradley Beal off the bench thing. It is what it is. But it's still a really good spot to be all of those other Philly guys. If they're in that starting five, they're going to be a very strong consideration across the board.
Yeah, and we'll see what that starting lineup is. And and then we'll get that starting lineup also should be coming across the next few minutes. What's your expectation for the starting five for the 76ers?
Well, they've done this stuff sometimes when like an Oubre comes in late where he maybe comes off the bench, and then you could see Kyle Lowry. But Kyle Lowry's out for today, so it would have to be Reggie Jackson. I think that's unlikely. So Tyrese Maxey, Oubre, Paul George, Caleb Martin, Yabusele.
The other guy they've started in some of these scenarios this year has been KJ Martin. He's out as well.
Yep.
So they really don't have that many players to go to. I think Oubre will be in the starting lineup.
I do too.
Okay, we had a couple of super chats here, so let's answer these, and then we'll check out Discord for any other questions you guys have. If you haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got Malukar as well as Chris Williams. Each of them gifted out 5 YouTube memberships. So guys, thank you very much. We appreciated it. Malukar and Chris Williams, 5 YouTube memberships given back to the community there. We love it. Then we've got Peyton Bunn. Says he's got $5,500 for utility spot. Who do we like best? $5,500 at utility, Eric. All right, 5,500. Could be Oubre, actually. I'm going to assume. So Cole
Zach
Anthony,
Edey.
That would be number 1 for me from a projection standpoint, but I assume you probably already have him in the lineup. Actually, Tobias Harris at $5,400.
Yep, Tobias Harris looks pretty good too, 5,400. It's him, or I love Keon Johnson too. Keon Johnson I've got for 30 and change, so Keon.
Yeah, 2 guys who project pretty comparably there. So definitely ones that are going to be in a chunk of my lineups. 2 good-looking options there, Peyton Bunn. And good, we give you multiple ones. So if you already got one of them in your lineup, play the other one instead. Then Jeff Williams wants to know Hardy or Lonzo for a last man in on DK, Eric. Hardy or Lonzo Ball?
Jaden Hardy for me.
Let's see. I am going to...
I don't like him on DraftKings at 4,500 for what it's worth. It's probably actually Ball, but I don't like either.
Yeah, the answer so Lonzo projects. Oh, we just got the starting lineup.
Exactly what we said.
Nothing unexpected. Maxey, Oubre, George, Caleb Martin, Yabusele for the 76ers. Nothing weird that we have to change for that. So that's your starting lineup for the Philadelphia 76ers tonight. Getting back to Jeff's question, we do have Lonzo projected for 2 more fantasy points than Jaden Hardy. We got Lonzo around 21.5 fantasy points. We got Hardy at about 19.5 fantasy points. And here's a big issue with this, though, is that Lonzo Ball, there's kind of a cap ceiling because realistically, how many minutes you're going to be getting out of Lonzo today? And he's still a good fantasy producer and a good real life player. He just doesn't have the ability to go play 30 plus minutes. And when you consider how much value there is on this slate, to really take down a GPP today, you're going to need some big scores from guys across all of your positions. So even if you go out, like if Lonzo scores 26, 27 fantasy points at $4,200, you'd feel pretty good about that. It's not going to kill you. I just don't know that he has the ceiling to win a GPP when his minutes are probably capped to like 22 to 24.
100%. And the easiest way to explain it is Lonzo Ball, he could put up 40, but you got to imagine, okay, 40 fantasy points. I'm going to need him to basically perform at a 1.8 fantasy point per minute rate, 1.7 fantasy point per minute rate. That's far less likely than a Keon Johnson walking into 40 minutes. That's far less likely than, a Tyrese Martin walking into 40 minutes. Like, we're not projecting him for that, but like, they don't have to overperform. They just simply have to be on the floor more. And it's just easier to walk into that upside with that in mind. Now, nobody's playing ball. There's a reason for it. And if you're trying to get different in one spot and you're super chalky elsewhere, sure. But I got to think over any large sample size, you're just better off having the guys who have right tails where the minutes can be the difference maker rather than just insane efficiency.
I agree. And let's go back into Discord now. I see we got some questions here. First question from Discord.
Grayson Allen starting. What the hell?
Sorry, what was that?
Grayson Allen is going to be starting today. Did they just lie? Did they just flat out lie to us? What's going on? They're not going to start Ryan Dunn? Who did they end up starting? Rich just threw it into the chat. So he said Grayson Allen starting for Phoenix.
Okay. So there we go. Grayson Allen starting for Phoenix. Then I assume that means no Ryan Dunn, unless they're going small and they're bringing Plumlee off the bench and starting.
That would make sense. I mean, Durant on Yabusele doesn't surprise me. Like, I think that would make a lot of sense. Yeah, Jones, Dunn, Booker, Durant, Plumlee. So yeah, no, it's not true. Rich just had that wrong. There you go. Eric, what are you talking about? Look above, News God. He literally put it in the chat. Grayson Allen starting for Phoenix. Richie put it in chat. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, he ain't. So
yeah,
I would have liked, it didn't end up happening. I would have liked the Durant at center lineup. It's not happening.
Underdog, NBA app line. Underdog posted ties. Okay. Thanks, Richie. Thanks.
All good. All right. We've got that sorted right now. And getting back to the questions in Discord, this is Boss Monkey 26. Boss Monkey wants to know, if playing on Yahoo, should I listen to DK or FanDuel thoughts, or both unrelated? Yeah, both are pretty unrelated because the Yahoo pricing is way different. So it's going to be, the scoring is the same as FanDuel scoring, but the pricing is like the min price is $10, and then you get the studs will be priced like $45 to $55. Yep. Like in general, the value plays are the best value plays across all sites. Like, it's very rare that somebody like a Tyrese Martin is a great play on DraftKings and FanDuel, but is irrelevant to Yahoo. So in general, the top pay-up options are still going to be our favorite pay-up options. Favorite value is still favorite value. But some of the guys in the in-between, their price points could differ a little bit there.
No fake news in chat, people.
Wants to
know
if
fake
Cat is
news.
out, how many minutes do we think Precious plays?
Let's take a look. Precious would obviously walk into a lot more minutes, but he's 4,500. So he was not going to be nuke of the night, but he definitely walks into a lot of minutes, is going to look pretty decent in that spot. They brought Huck Porty in. Huck Porty is going to be, walking into some minutes. If you get Karl Anthony Towns out, probably like 12, 14 minutes. That's not all that appealing. You have Jericho Sims there as well. He can fill in and do whatever else they need. But Precious Achiuwa at 4,500 with power forward eligibility, there's some utility to that. He played 27 minutes against Chicago last time out. You're going to project him for at least that. Going forward, you're going to probably project him for a lot more than that. Precious Achiuwa, definitely somebody who's viable with Karl Anthony Towns out, but he's going to pale in comparison to like a Yabusele earlier.
Let's see. What starts have we seen from Precious this year? Starts from Precious. He's made starts, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So Precious Achiuwa this year he's only made one start. He played 28 minutes in that game. It was also a blowout against your Timberwolves, Eric.
Well, of
Who
course
else
it was.
out in that game. Cat
Did we
played that
win
game.
at least? Did we win?
No, the Knicks won by 26.
That
was the game. That was the game where where the Knicks were just crushing the Timberwolves. It was Cat's first game back, and Tid just left him in the fourth quarter to rack up stats.
So fun. So unbelievable to be a Minnesota sports fan after yesterday, and like the Timberwolves in disarray, and just when everything looks good, it doesn't. It's hilarious how that always happens.
So the Knicks do have Huck Porty available. I think that's more in case of emergency, though. I
Correct.
don't think that he would be playing any kind of significant minutes.
I think you would play over, well, maybe not.
Jericho Sims could be ahead of him in the rotation.
For sure. But I just gave it to one of the two guys. I just gave it to Huck Porty because it was fun.
Yeah, so Precious, I don't know, 32 minutes?
Yeah, I said you'd project him for over 27. I have him in for 30 right now in the event that he ends up out, but right now I have him in for 18 minutes, Precious.
Yeah, well, the question was if Cat sits.
Yeah, if Cat sits, I would have him at 30. That's the number that I've predetermined.
Okay. All right. Next question here. It is from either way, Precious, assuming that, and they could just start Jericho Sims because it's something Tibbs likes to do when his starting center's out sometime. So that is going to change this equation a little bit. If Precious Achiuwa starts and there is no Karl Anthony Towns, which obviously he's not starting if Cat plays. So Cat's out, Precious is the starter. I would have him in for 32 minutes for myself.
Agreed. Okay.
Gator Nation wants to know who will be the biggest bust relative to their ownership on FanDuel. Eric, ownership bust on FanDuel. What do you think is going over-owned on the FanDuel side of things?
And that's a lot of people who want to play Jaren Jackson Jr. at 8,800. He looks good. Don't get me wrong, but man, 50% of lineups, Jaren Jackson Jr. That's a hefty number. I would say Jalen Wells probably ends up being worse. Jalen Wells, 4,700. He had one good game. He walked into some usage. Good for him. Traditionally, he has not been doing that on the Memphis side, but all those prices are far more advantageous over on FanDuel than on DK, which is why we're seeing ownership for them there. We're not seeing it over here. I definitely disagree with Jalen Wells.
There's honestly a lot of guys that have used being over-owned on FanDuel. I agree with you, Triple J, and it's not even a knock against Triple J. It's just there's a lot of pay-up options that are looking good on the slate, and there's a lot of value. You know, you got Triple J in about 50% of the field's lineups, like you mentioned. That's a super high number. I agree with you on Jalen Wells. Denny Avdia is over 30% owned, and his price has gone up. That's a pretty steep price tag. You've got Cade over 20% owned, and his price tag's at 10,000, which, once again, not a knock on Cade, but I'd rather spend up for Giannis or Wemby, who are comparably owned. Let's see, who else on FanDuel? Some of the Giddey ownership, you had pointed this out a few slates ago, has also been weird with the Bulls being healthier in terms of at least Levine being healthy now. Josh Giddey is chalk at 7K on FanDuel. That's another one that I think is a little bit over-owned. So
whoa, we got Malik Beasley starting. Yo, it's about time.
Starting lineup for...
Man, there's so many good options today.
All right. Couple of starting lineups just came in. We've got the Blazers, Simons, Sharp, Kamara, Avdia, and Ayton. No shock there, other than the fact that Ayton was just very oddly listed as questionable earlier due to rest, and then he got taken off the injury report, so that was all weird. But anyway, just confirmed he's in the starting lineup, so it's good to have that confirmation now. And then the Pistons starting lineup, Cade, Beasley, Hardaway Jr., Harris, Duren. So one thing that is definitely impacting Beasley being in the starting lineup is, in addition to Jaden Ivey being out for the year, Asar Thompson, he is also going to be out today. He's dealing with an illness. Seems like half the NBA dealing with a flu bug or something right now. What do you make of Malik Beasley starting for Detroit?
It looks really good. I mean, he's already playing low 30s minutes, 31, 33 the last two. I think it was a matter of time before they just decided to put Beasley into the starting lineup. It didn't make sense to me to have Wendell Moore, or it would make sense to have Asar Thompson and then bring him off the bench. But like, you just kind of get your better players out there for more minutes if you're trying to win games. And I think Detroit is still trying to win basketball games. They've been a lot better than I think advertised before the season. A lot of that is Tobias Harris, huge upgrade. You have Tim Hardaway Jr., serviceable at times. Malik Beasley, though, ends up being the guy that it's just weird to me that they wouldn't just start him I think he looks good at 5,600 against Portland. Nothing that I'm going to be like Hulk slamming by any means, but I do kind of want to talk about the push and pull effect of like Cade Cunningham, because Cade Cunningham is one of my highest owned players in terms of spend ups. How do you feel about him with Beasley starting? Because like, I don't know, you go through the rates and it just seems like with Jaden Ivey off the floor, Cade Cunningham just looks insane. And now Beasley's probably going to be the guy walking into number 2 in usage, 23.6% behind Ivy. It's ever so slim, difference between the two there. Ivy had been very efficient this year, but they're both fantasy point per minute guys there in the sample size. And Malik Beasley fantasy point a minute, 34 fantasy points, 33 fantasy points. I mean, is that like a realistic projection?
Beasley, I'm not sure if we were expecting him to start before this. We had Beasley in I think we were already projecting Beasley to start. We Beasley at 32 and a half minutes and 30 and a half fantasy points, $5,600. He's definitely somebody who points per dollar looks pretty good. He just doesn't look as good as a lot of the other guys on the slate. So I'm rerunning lineups for all the most recent news now. Yep. Like I assume Beasley's the guy who's in like 10-ish% of lineups or something for me. And also not because he projects poorly points per dollar, it's just because of how much value there is on the slate and how that ends up gearing my lineups towards being stars and just stars and scrubs.
Yep, I totally get it. He kind of is in an outlier price range, 5,600, but if the ownership stays down, that's very appealing.
And then as far as the point on Cade, I do think Cade looks better on DraftKings than FanDuel because he's got the sub 10K price point on DK. There's more positional flexibility as well. The only knock I have against Cade is that I prefer Giannis and Wemby, but Cade's definitely going. Also, I prefer Tyrese Maxey to Cade as well. So if we're talking about spend up options right now, Cade's probably 4th for me.
Okay. Yeah, Cade is above. No, he's not above Maxey for me. Let me double check here. So many moving parts. Yeah, I've got Maxey. No, I've got him. I've got Cade projected better than Maxey by a pretty distant.
Yeah,
it's enough that I'm going to get to more Cade Cunningham. Correct. That is true.
Let's do the nuke of the night right here. I'm almost positive I know yours is going to be because I know you. But go ahead, play the animation, Jordan. Then we'll come back. I'm going to guess what Eric's is, and then he's going to give out what might be the exact same player. Run the graphic, Jordan. Here we go. Are you ready for my guess?
Okay.
So Eric believes Karl-Anthony Towns is not going to play today. Therefore, Jalen Brunson is going to be his nuke of the night. Am I correct?
I almost want to switch it because I don't want you to be correct, but you are correct. I was like, maybe I can say Josh Hart instead because he's a walking triple-double, yada, yada, yada. No, it's definitely Jalen Brunson. Now, we have Tyrese Maxey. We have Cade Cunningham. And then you can play a third point guard as well. And I think that's something that it looks like I'm going to be doing in some of my single entry stuff. And right now that guy is Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson without Cat. I mean, we've just seen kind of a complete different change over this New York Knicks team. Obviously, the turnover from Isaiah Hartenstein, one of the best defensive centers, to Karl-Anthony Towns, one of the best offensive centers. And that's just kind of dwindled on Jalen Brunson's production. He's been right around a 1.15, 1.2 guy. He's a 1.3 DraftKings points per minute producer in 187 minutes over the course of the last month with Karl-Anthony Towns off the floor. Now, why do I put in the last month and why am I not using the full sample size? Precious Achiuwa did come along, but also Miles McBride's been out for a lot of that here too. And if you have extra clearance where Miles McBride ends up out as well, you could just see unlimited minutes or Cameron Payne picking up some minutes playing alongside of him. Tyler Kolek, if they go that direction for a couple of minutes, although, might just relieve Brunson for like a minute here, a minute there. But a 32% usage, a 36.5% assist percentage without Karl-Anthony Towns on the floor. I absolutely love him for tournaments at 9K. I don't think he's going to be popular under any circumstances, even if this news comes out later. And it's only a 209 total, but I repeat, I disagree with it. Jalen Brunson, nuke of the night.
All right, there we go. I might know you better than your wife knows you.
That's honestly, yeah, obviously you do that thing that I like, so it's okay.
There we go. Listen, not everybody's into it, but for somebody special, why not? So I'm looking at all of the updated projections, updated ownerships that we have right now, Eric. And the one thing that really stands out to me, at least in our ownership projections here, Keon Johnson's come down quite a bit as far as projected ownership goes. Now, it's not like he's unowned or anything like that. He's right around 20% owned, but he was closer to 30% earlier. I understand that more value is opened up, but as far as the Nets players go, Keon Johnson's one who I'm pretty confident is going to be in the starting lineup. Tyrese Martin, I think, will start, but I'm not super confident in that. And Keon Johnson having some lineup spots reserved with him in them. And I know that I'm not giving out anything super contrarian here. Keon Johnson right around 20% owned. I think he should be quite a bit higher than that. We've got him projected for over 30 fantasy points. I really like the price point for him. And this team is completely devoid of playmakers. Who else is going to initiate offense for them other than Keon Johnson, with D'Angelo Russell and Ben Simmons both out for tonight? I want to be overweight to Keon Johnson, Eric.
I love that. Keon Johnson was nuke of the night for me a couple weeks ago. I mean, he's been somebody I've brought up a lot on these shows. I think he's pretty nice, actually, at times. And I saw the DK DFS over in Tails ended up posting 3.5 assists. That is a low freaking number for Keon Johnson in this spot where there's no other primary ball handler. You have Indy, so it ups in terms of possessions, ups in terms of pace. I like Keon Johnson a lot. That is for sure. Oh, if Greg pulls out baby oil, I'm gone. Yeah, Loco, you don't have to worry about that. You just have to worry about Rich putting fake news into chat. Way to go, Rich. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. Somebody ban Rich from chat. Ban Rich.
That'd be fun.
Spreading fake news in here.
Tilting me. How dare you?
For some super chats that came in here. We've got 1-2 saying FanDuel green checks are as trustworthy as Jordan Klein. Jordan Klein's trustworthy. Jordan Klein's pretty trustworthy. I don't have green checks, though. Very, very skeptical. If people are still getting their news from FanDuel and DraftKings waiting for the green check marks, it is just guaranteed to go awry. We should be trolling Eric about that more. Connor.
You can always trust a dishonest man to be dishonest. Me, I'm dishonest. A little bit of Jack Sparrow for him. That is Jordan Klein.
Also, Jack Sparrow, is he responsible for the green checks on FanDuel and DraftKings?
And really bad eggs. Yes.
There we go.
Yes, he is.
All right. Connor wants to know DK cash locks. Am I nuts? Yes, you're nuts if you're not playing Tyrese Maxey in cash games today. So in cash games, even if you don't like somebody quite as much as the field, you should be playing some of the guys who are just uber popular. So for cash games today, play Tyrese Martin. You could pivot off him if he isn't starting, but assuming that he does end up starting, like you want to play Tyrese Martin, you want to play Cole Anthony, Paul George, Yabusele, Giannis, Tyrese Maxey, and then just whoever else ends up fitting in for you. Yes, play Tyrese Maxey in cash games today.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my cash build had Day'Ron Sharp in it before the show. I think because of like the idea of like, it's either going to be a Wemby Giannis lineup or it's going to be, it's such an interesting cash build today. So I didn't end up playing it, but we'll say that like you are going to need that one sub 4K piece if you're just going to jam the 3 Philly guys that are on the more expensive end. Maxey, Paul George, I guess he obviously not on the expensive end, but like it's an interesting cash day for sure, especially with late news pending.
Just play the super chalk guys in cash. You don't need to go differentiate and say that you're playing. Like, I don't even know who it is you're pivoting off of Maxey to. Instead, just play Maxey in cash. Next question here. It is from Einstein. He wants to know, how do we view Dame in relation to somebody like Tyrese Maxey? So Dame is benefiting because we've got the absence of Chris Middleton today. Middleton out due to injury maintenance. So that does benefit him to some extent. As far as just a 1v1, I pretty strongly prefer Tyrese Maxey to Damian Lillard. And it's a couple of reasons why. Obviously, no Joel Embiid for the Philadelphia 76ers. Another angle to this as well, though, is Maxey's, $700 cheaper for the slate. Mm-hmm. So, I prefer Maxey to Dame. To get a ceiling out of Dame, he's pretty scoring dependent. I know that there are assists involved too, but to get the real ceiling out of Dame, you need one of those 40-point games where he's knocking down half his threes. And while it's certainly within the realm of possibilities, there's just other players I prefer to spend up for tonight, and he's way down the list for me. Dame, somebody you're getting much of?
No, it's more to do with the fact that with Chris Middleton off the floor this season, 807 minutes for Dame Lillard, 32.8% assist percentage, looks really, really nifty. Giannis Antetokounmpo is at 35.5% ownership, or 35.5% assist percentage, excuse me. And then Dame, we know he's not really adding anything in terms of rebounds. His usage right around 28%. It pales in comparison to Giannis's 37%. They're coming off of back-to-back losses. This is just like full steam ahead for Giannis. If you got to a couple shares of Dame, I don't completely hate the idea of it, but there's no doubt that he's going to pale in comparison for me.
Yeah, that's where I'm at on this as well. How are you doing on your lineups, by the way?
I'm almost done.
Yeah, I'm doing one. I assume this is going to be the final sim run for me.
I like
unless
Beasley
we
way
get-
more than you do for what it's worth. Just looking at it, I have so much Beasley.
Well, I haven't run my lineups yet, so I don't even know how much Beasley
okay.
I have.
Never mind.
I just assume I could usually eyeball
That's fair.
I've just built so many lineups that usually running stuff through the sims, I could eyeball players' ownership projections and projections of the other guys and get like a general sense of where I'm going to be on guys. So I'm running it right now, but that was I could be wrong, but my assumption was that I was going to have somewhere around like 10-ish% on Malik Beasley.
How much Tobias Harris? I mean, that's the other guy that I'm just, oh boy, it's uncomfortable how much I have of Tobias Harris.
I will let you know in like 2 minutes here.
It's very nice.
I mean, this
is
is going to be my final run of lineups unless Cat gets rolled out in the next 5 minutes.
It's probably a good idea. Oh man.
Kicking off the sim run. Next question we had in the super chats. Brandon Wagner wants to know, is Najee Marshall in play today? So once again, Dallas really shorthanded. Najee Marshall, points per dollar basis, not terrible. And like he's had way higher usage in some of these situations when Kyrie and Luka have both been out this year than you expect for a player like Najee Marshall. But another guy who I'm going to have a hard time prioritizing with all the other value on this slate. Just another guy who's going to be in a couple of lineups for me, but not a real priority. So if you're playing 1, 2, 3 lineups, I wouldn't have Najee Marshall in any of them.
Yeah, as Adam would say back in the day, casualty of the slate. I think that's the perfect way to describe it.
Fair enough. Let's see what we have here. All right, bunch of questions here in Discord, so we'll get through these as quickly as possible. Elder wants to know, is Ricky Council as a pivot for the big ass DK contest for value? Feels like he get a bump in minutes now. They've shown they like Ricky Council at times this year. He's not a terrible fantasy producer either. But yeah, there's times the 76ers have been shorthanded and Ricky Council ends up playing more than you'd expect. I remember a game earlier in the year where I was pretty high on KJ Martin as a starter, and then he ended up losing out minutes to Ricky Council in the second half of that game. If you're looking to get super different in large field GPP, I think you could do worse than Ricky Council. I think he's viable. Do you like Ricky Council or any other crazy punts that you're looking to take a chance on?
Yeah, I saw that come into chat. I have 4.5% Ricky Council in my lineup. So yeah, I'm going to play some Ricky Council. I think he's a 3K flat piece that there are just ways that he ends up on the court a lot more than we think. Either Oubre is limited to some extent. I do like Oubre. I've got him in 16% of lineups. I think that obviously unfadable, in my opinion. I've got 88% of him. Knew he would end up being my highest owned guy when it was all said and done. But there's no question that Ricky Council can go out and get you a bucket. And, you know, if something happens, you know, God forbid to Maxey, they've had so many injuries all season long or whatever. I mean, Ricky Council will go out and just chuck ad nauseum. So Ricky Council, definitely somebody at 3K flat. It's not going to look good in terms of projection, but there is definitely a path there.
I have so much exposure to the first game on the slate now.
I know.
Which, you know, makes sense because we've got no Joel Embiid for the 76ers. I'm going to be quite disappointed today, Eric, if there's unexpected injury news, though.
Yeah, so the one thing I did do is I just ended up boosting up. Like, Hart is 8K. Hart is really, really hard for me to make a case for. But the Jalen Brunson thing, I'm pretty positive that that's just one where it's like, if the news came out now, it's like you would look at Brunson and Maxey pretty, not similarly by any means. It's different game environments and, there's a different price point, $400 difference. But I definitely want to just kind of make sure that I get up to a certain amount of him. And I just kind of took his ROI to the moon. And then I just exposure capped him around 20%.
Makes sense to me. Let's see what else we have in the super chats. We have one from Smoothie. Smoothie1 says, Dariq Whitehead, I paid, okay. So he's not even asking a question. He paid us money just to tell us he's playing Dariq Whitehead tonight.
There's a joke there somewhere. I'm just going to let it go. We're just moving on.
There, not enough time left for Eric to make sex jokes. So Whitehead, good luck with your.
There was something dirty there.
Lineups.
There was something dirty there. We'll just let it go.
Damn right there was. Alucard wants to know, how am I deciding between the two top pay ups for single entry? or is it just take both and run? Yeah, so looking through my lineups, well, I have a very similar amount of exposure to Wemby and Giannis. I'm not playing single entry today. I'm only playing some of the mass entry stuff. Just based on what my lineups are looking like, if I was playing one of the pay-ups in single entry today, it would be Wemby for me. Yourself, Eric? One pay-up option?
Oh, Giannis by a mile.
Okay. Giannis for Eric, Wemby for me. Active Guru, favorite high-owned and low-owned player at each position on DK. All right, let's run through this really fast, Eric. Chalk option point guard, contrarian option at point guard, and we'll call contrarian option anybody sub 10% owned.
Okay.
At point guard, chalk option I like Tyrese Maxey. Contrarian option I like is actually Chris Paul.
I don't mind the Chris Paul shout out. He's in my number one lineup right now, which I'm a little bit surprised looking at the Sims. Brunson, my contrarian piece. I think that's self-explanatory.
Shooting guard for me, chalk option Tyrese Martin. That is obviously assuming that he is starting. Contrarian option. By the way, I ended up with 9% of Malik Beasley. So right around what I thought I was going to be getting to.
Okay.
Contrarian option for me. He's not quite super low owned or anything like that, but I'm overweight to Vassell at 15% ownership.
All right. Cole Anthony. I mean, you could have just put him at point guard as well. I mean, it is what it is there. Paul George will do the same thing at small forward. Contrarian shooting guard that I like. Luke Kennard.
Small forward for me, a chalky one, Paul George. Contrarian one, Jalen Wilson. I don't think he looks dramatically different from a lot of the other cheap Nets guys who are pulling ownership, and Jalen Wilson's 10% on. So Jalen Wilson, that's my contrarian one. Power forward, Eric?
Yeah. So, well, I didn't do small forward either. Paul George. And then, then I like the Jalen Wilson call. We'll double down on that one. Denny Avdia, chalky option. I like it, power forward, and then contrarian. Oh, Yabusele, the guy that I have the most of by far. So that's self-explanatory as well. And then John Conchar.
Power forward for me, Yabusele as chalk, contrarian. Also, it's hard to find guys who are like sub 10% owned that I'm double-ish the field on to go to as contrarian one. So I'll just go Jalen Wilson again here. Then at center, chalk play and a contrarian play for yourself, Eric.
At center, I mean, chalk play, Wemby. I like Giannis and Wemby so much. And then contrarian option, Nicholas Claxton.
For me, a chalk option at center, Wemby, contrarian option, Derek Lively, pulling 11% ownership. And if you guys haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You're going to want to watch Josh and I over on playback right after this ends. I see Josh is already waiting for me in playback, and in about 90 seconds. By the way, Cat just ruled out. So
beautiful.
No Cat for today. Jalen Brunson, he looks great. Josh and I will talk about more of the implications of Cat being out just in a second when we get over to playback. But yeah, guys, no Karl Anthony Towns today. That game locks in 31 minutes. We'll have more on that over there. Really quick, I want to bang out as many of these questions as we can, and then we'll have player projections, ownership updates, probably in the next like 4 minutes or something like that for us to review on playback. We've got Jake wants to know, is Andre Jackson a good play at $3,900? Not really. M Grizzly, am I boosting anyone? Right now, really quick, I'd say boost Jalen Brunson. Larson, 407, any love for Tim Hardaway on FanDuel? Viable value option, but I wouldn't put him in the category of loving him. And then Strickstein wants to know, do I like Taurean Prince as a last man in for cheap? No, I don't. There's a lot of cheap options I like today. Taurean Prince doesn't have to be one of them. Any final thoughts for yourself there, Eric?
Got all my Knicks updates. I'm going to have way more than the field. I'm very happy.
There we go. All right, guys, go join Josh and I over in playback. We're going to be watching the games on screen. We're going to be looking at the Knicks, whatever it is that they end up doing with their starting lineup. I assume it's going to be Precious Achiuwa, but we'll see. The Knicks could be dumb and Tibbs might want to go to Jericho Sims again. We're going to be getting that news probably in the next 10 minutes or something like that. Player projections, ownership projections, all updates coming. Come join us in playback. Jordan dropped the link in there. So see you guys over there. Have a good night.